Chapter 566. A huge roar resounded through the clouds. In this vast land without any obstructions, it was like a storm that swept out in all directions. Chu Mu's sprinting figure suddenly stopped. He tilted his head to listen. That huge roar seemed to be coming from all directions. It was hard to distinguish, but Chu Mu's hearing was very sharp. After listening carefully, he was able to distinguish the source of the roar. It's coming from the east. Chu Mu made a judgment in his heart. He immediately adjusted his direction and quickly rushed to the east. About 15 minutes later, Chu Mu saw a huge figure in front of him. It was like a small hill. When he got closer, he saw that it was a barbaric Tyrannosaurus. However, compared to the barbaric Tyrannosaurus he killed when he first entered the ancient wild realm, this barbaric Tyrannosaurus was much bigger. Its height exceeded 100 meters, at least 120 meters. Its huge body, rough skin, and heavy and domineering power made this barbaric Tyrannosaurus give Chu Mu a strong visual impact. The feeling was very strong in an instant. A wild aura was emitted from the barbaric Tyrannosaurus's huge body. It was like a surging tide, wave after wave, endless and terrifying pressure covered the sky. An earth-shattering barbaric Tyrannosaurus. Chu Mu's eyes became serious as he said each word. Soon after, a trace of excitement slowly bloomed on his face. One of the ways to determine whether a steel-shattering beast or earth-shattering beast was by height. 100 meters was one of the ways to determine whether a steel-shattering beast or earth-shattering beast was. Of course, using height to determine wasn't 100% accurate. This was because some barbaric giant beasts' bodies were slightly longer, not slightly taller. There were also some barbaric giant beasts that had special bloodlines and so on. Thus, height and size didn't necessarily work on them. However, for the barbaric Tyrannosaurus, which was a relatively common barbaric giant beast in the ancient wild realm, 100-meter height was very accurate. The barbaric Tyrannosaurus in front of him was 120 meters tall. It was completely an earth-shattering beast with terrifying strength. The battle intent in Chu Mu's heart was quickly concealed, because he saw that there was a person fighting with this savage Tyrannosaurus. 9 barbarians. Upon a closer look, the person fighting this earth-shattering savage behemoth was none other than Barbarian Jiu of the Barbarian Sword Association. He was the swordsman who looked like the boy next door. At this moment, he did not look gentle at all. His face was cold and stern, and his eyes constantly emitted an astonishingly sharp glint. As he swung his sword, the sword wind swept out wantonly, leaving marks on the ground. The sword used by Jiu Barbarian was actually a heavy sword that was known for its strength. Furthermore, he held the sword with one hand as he leaped around the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex. As he dodged the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's attacks, he constantly attacked with his sword. Every strike was timed perfectly, leaving wounds on the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's body. Savage behemoths were huge in size and had astonishing strength. Their vitality was hundreds, thousands of times, or even more than that of human swordsmen. Although they would bleed from mere wounds, it was not enough to affect them. In particular, their self-healing ability was also very astonishing. The wounds that were cut would heal in a short period of time. However, Jiu Barbarian's attacks were even faster, especially targeting the joints of the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex. His repeated slashes caused the wounds to deepen. However, the earth-shattering savage Tyrannosaurus Rex's skin was extremely tough, and it was not easy to break through. Every attack it made seemed to trigger a tsunami, causing the air to constantly vibrate, forming a terrifying shock wave that wreaked havoc in all directions. The power of these vibrations affected the surrounding environment, forming a zone that was similar to a swordsmanship domain. However, it was an uncontrollable chaotic domain that affected Jiu Barbarian's movements to a certain extent. He had to exert more strength every time. The barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's tail swung as if it was stirring the sea. Even Chu-Mu, who was tens of thousands of meters away, could clearly feel the terrifying power. Although there were already people hunting this barbaric Tyrannosaurus rex, Chu-Mu did not leave immediately. Instead, he stood where he was and observed. How strong was an earth-shattering savage beast? Chu-Mu did not have a conclusion before. Now was a good opportunity to observe and understand the strength of an earth-shattering savage beast. It would be more advantageous for him to hunt earth-shattering savage behemoths in the future. Geobarbarian was very strong. He had also cultivated a body-refining technique. His body was tyrannical and powerful, and the swords in his hands were the best of the best royal-grade swords. They were incomparably sharp, and their footwork was exquisite and direct. They retreated and advanced, completely avoiding the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's attack. However, the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's body was huge, and its reaction was not as fast, so it was hit by every sword. Under Chu-Mu's gaze, Geobarbarian suddenly dodged the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's foot. His feet stomped heavily on the ground, and his entire body shot up into the sky like a cannonball. He was like a rocket with astonishing power. Barbarian sword kill. At the same time, Geobarbarian roared like a clap of thunder. A dusky yellowish-brown light emerged from his body and instantly filled his entire sword. The sword was filled with violent power in an instant, and a savage aura spread out. This sword was like a meteor that cut through the sky. It was incomparably brilliant. This sword pierced through the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's chin, which was difficult to dodge. Under the terrifying explosion of power, the power at the tip of the sword rotated at high speed. It was like a drill that drove the whole body. Man and sword became one as they rushed straight up. A strange cracking sound was heard. Geobarbarian, together with his sword, pierced through the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's chin and upper jaw, and rushed into the sky. The pain of having its chin and upper jaw pierced made the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex go completely crazy. Terrifying wild beast power surged out in an instant, but Geobarbarian was even faster. His body stopped in midair, and he raised his sword up high with both hands. Terrifying energy gathered on the sword, and the sword light appeared. It was condensed and was dozens of meters long. Barbarian Sword Slash. The name of the Geobarbarian's sword technique was rather simple, but its power was not simple at all. When the sword slashed down, it was as if it could split a mountain. The barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex, which was in the midst of going berserk, was immediately hit in the head by the sword. A cracking sound was heard, and the tough and rough skin was cut open. The incomparably hard skull was also cut open by the terrifying sword light. The power of the barbarian sword slash was shocking. It split the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's head in half before it dissipated. Geobarbarian's body fell, and brain matter and blood continuously spurted out of the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's head. It roared in grief, and its huge body swayed wildly before it slowly fell to the side. What was shocking was that its tail actually made a final counterattack. It swung towards Geobarbarian at an incomparable speed, like a meteor piercing through the sky. With a bang, this attack was completely out of Geobarbarian's expectations. He hurriedly used his sword to block it, but was immediately hit. The sword flew out of his hand, and Geobarbarian's body was also sent flying. He spat out a mouthful of blood in midair, and fell 100 meters away. With a bang, the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex fell to the ground. Geobarbarian quickly got up and took out a medicinal pill as fast as he could. He also wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, broke through the billowing dust, picked up his sword, and rushed towards the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex on the ground. He was extremely cautious. That attack was the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's final attack. It was a swan song. This scene fell into Chu-Mu's eyes, causing him to be astonished and vigilant. Next, Geobarbarian broke open the barbaric Tyrannosaurus Rex's body and took out its inner core. This inner core was the item used for the sword hunter assessment. In other words, Barbarian had passed half of the assessment. As long as he could survive until the teleportation gate opened again and returned to the sword hunter mansion, he would become a sword hunter. If Barbarian's strength was like this, then the swordsmen who were called the 5 talents with him would not be weak either. Passing the assessment should be a sure thing. This is the strength of an Earth-level barbaric giant beast. It's really strong. I wonder if dual polarity can kill it? Chumu felt that he was not very confident. Dual polarity's power was not weak, but it only reached the attack strength of an ordinary sword venerable. The power of the barbaric sword kill and barbaric sword slash used by Barbarian was above that of dual polarity. However, if it was iron slash, its power would not be inferior to the barbaric sword kill and barbaric sword slash. It might even be superior. However, the power of iron slash was completely restrained. It was fine against swordsmen because it could kill them in an instant, but it was not enough to deal with huge barbaric giant beasts. I'll take it one step at a time. At least, I'll find an Earth-level barbaric giant beast first and then slowly grind it to death. Chumu thought to himself and turned to leave. Because he cultivated the heavenly wasteland sword physique, he never felt tired no matter what kind of battle. In terms of physical endurance, he far surpassed other swordsmen. Chumu had just turned to leave when Barbarian, who was a distance away, quickly turned to look. A bright light flashed in his eyes and his face once again revealed that comfortable boy-next-door smile. However, if anyone treated him as a kind person with a gentle personality, they would definitely regret it. Perhaps it was because of bad luck. Chumu felt that if the assessment only lasted for a day, then he would have already failed. Are there so few Earth-level barbaric giant beasts? Chumu frowned and asked doubtfully. He did not know whether it was because this area was too big or because there were too few Earth-level barbaric giant beasts. All in all, he had not encountered a single Earth-level barbaric giant beast after a day here. However, he had encountered 2 Steel-level barbaric giant beasts, both of which were relatively common. Chumu spent a bit of time to kill these 2 shattering steel-rank savage beasts, so he obtained 2 inner cores. As for the value of the other parts, they couldn't compare to the inner cores, so Chumu didn't bother with them. Previously, Chumu was able to break through from the peak of the origin realm to the small success because he had reached a critical point. Therefore, he was able to break through within 9 days by using the violent barbaric giant beast's inner elixirs. Now, even if he completely absorbed the 2 steel-level barbaric giant beast's inner elixirs, Chumu's sword yuan would not show any obvious growth. Therefore, Chumu was not in a hurry to absorb them. The most important thing now was to find an Earth-level barbaric giant beast and kill it. That was the way to go. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 567. The purple aurora pierced through the void, leaving behind a faint mark. With a poochie sound, the head of a savage ankylosaurus was penetrated. Red blood with a little bit of yellow instantly gushed out from the wound. The savage ankylosaurus let out a sorrowful roar. Its strong 4 limbs stomped on the ground, creating a crater with every step. The earth trembled and dust billowed. This was also a steel shatter-level savage beast. The savage ankylosaurus was one of the more common savage beasts in the ancient realm. The difference between them and the savage Tyrannosaurus was that the savage ankylosaurus had 4 limbs on the ground, as if it was covered in a layer of armor. It was like a super heavy tank with slow reactions, but once it charged, even the savage Tyrannosaurus wouldn't be able to withstand its might. Its head was also covered with a layer of hard carapace. Once it was hit, even a mountain would be smashed to pieces. At the same time, that layer of armor gave the savage ankylosaurus an unparalleled defense. Even Chumu's moon severing couldn't break through that layer of armor. Chu-Mu had no choice but to use dual polarity to find the weak point on the savage Ankylosaurus head and kill it in one strike. Different savage beasts had different characteristics. Since they were all steel shatter level, there had to be a strategy when dealing with them. Once the savage Ankylosaurus died, its armor was still tough. However, Chu-Mu was able to follow the trajectory and cut it open to take out its inner core. This savage Ankylosaurus was the 23rd steel shatter level savage beast that Chu-Mu had killed in half a month. As for earth shatter level savage beasts, Chu-Mu had encountered a savage pterosaur 6 days ago. The savage pterosaur could fly, and its speed was very fast. Its claws were also terrifyingly sharp. Chu-Mu couldn't fly, so he didn't have the upper hand when fighting it. In fact, he was even at a disadvantage. If it wasn't for his profound footwork, exquisite sword arts, and the sword technique domain that affected the savage pterosaur, allowing him to escape by luck, he would have died under the pterosaur's sharp claws or jaws. 3 days ago, Chu-Mu encountered another earth-shattering savage behemoth. It was a savage Tyrannosaurus. This Tyrannosaurus rex was even larger than the one the 9 barbarians had killed. It was more than 180 meters tall. Even the 9 barbarians were no match for this Tyrannosaurus rex. With Chu-Mu's attack power at the time, it was impossible for him to cause much damage to this Tyrannosaurus rex. Fortunately, the Tyrannosaurus barbaric Tyrannosaurus was violent. It had a huge body and astonishing strength, but it was relatively weak in terms of speed and reaction time. Taking advantage of this, Chu-Mu was able to successfully escape. Chu-Mu had encountered 2 earth-shattering wild beasts, but he couldn't kill them because of his strength and other reasons. This more or less made Chu-Mu a little depressed. As earth-shattering rank savage beasts, there were naturally strong and weak ones. For example, the savage Tyrannosaurus that the 9 barbarians killed was relatively weak, while the 180-meter-tall savage Tyrannosaurus Chu-Mu encountered was relatively strong. Only a powerful venerable swordsman could contend against a powerful earth-shattering savage beast. Thinking about it, other swordsmen would probably encounter the same thing. If they couldn't escape, only death would await them. After half a month, Chu-Mu's swordsmanship had improved again as he battled with the savage beasts. His overall strength had also improved slightly. Using the flying swan illusory steps, Chu-Mu quickly ran across the vast land and continued to search for savage beasts to kill. The savage beasts didn't know how to conceal their aura fluctuations. Therefore, as long as one was within a certain range and carefully sensed, one would be able to sense the savage beast's aura fluctuations. Time passed day by day. From time to time, Chu-Mu would find a steel-shattering savage beast. The tyrannical steel-shattering savage beasts even required Chu-Mu to expend a lot of effort to kill. During this process, Chu-Mu's strength was slowly but steadily increasing. On the 25th day, Chu-Mu finally found a suitable earth-shattering savage beast as he wished. It was a savage Ankylosaurus. It had a huge body and thick limbs that were like pillars supporting the ground. It walked slowly, and with every step it took, the ground would shake and make a shocking sound. The savage Ankylosaurus was less than 100 meters tall, but its length was more than 100 meters, about 110 meters. Although it wasn't as strong as the 120-meter-tall savage Tyrannosaurus that the 9 barbarians had killed, it was more difficult to kill than the savage Tyrannosaurus in terms of tenacity. This was because the savage Ankylosaurus iron armor was too strong. It was several times stronger than the savage Tyrannosaurus. If this savage Ankylosaurus and the savage Tyrannosaurus that the 9 barbarians had killed were to fight to the death, it was hard to say who would die in the end. "You're the one." Chu-Mu's eyes shone with a strong light. He used his movement skill and rushed toward the savage Ankylosaurus. The savage Ankylosaurus also sensed Chu-Mu's appearance. It swept its thick tail, causing dust and smoke to billow. As the earthquake shook, countless rocks poured down like torrential rain toward Chu-Mu. It was as if it wanted to break through Chu Mu's body. His body was like a ghost as he shuttled through the torrential rain of rock. Chu Mu approached the savage ankylosaurus and landed on its back. His feet moved quickly toward its head. He jumped up high and stabbed out with his sword. A purple aurora instantly pierced through the sky. With a pop, the purple aurora hit the savage ankylosaurus' forehead. Originally, there should have been a weak point there, but this savage ankylosaurus' forehead had an extra layer of armor. The savage ankylosaurus raised its head and roared. A terrifying sound wave poured out like a storm, blasting toward Chu Mu. The void in front of him almost shattered. Chu Mu's expression changed greatly. He hurriedly used the inverse space step and appeared on the other side, narrowly avoiding the sound wave attack. The savage ankylosaurus immediately moved its thick limbs and began to charge. The savage ankylosaurus had a special characteristic. Once it started to charge, it would be difficult to stop unless it killed its target or ran out of energy. However, the savage ankylosaurus' stamina was astonishing. Even if it charged for an entire day, it wouldn't be tired. An earth-shattering ankylosaurus has fewer weaknesses. Chu Mu thought to himself as he dodged the savage ankylosaurus charge. The earth shook violently, causing people to suspect that it was going to crack open. The savage ankylosaurus lost its target and immediately changed direction during its charge. It charged toward Chu Mu again and again while roaring. Chu Mu dodged again and used cut iron. He slashed his sword at the savage ankylosaurus' neck, but it only left a white mark. What a strong defense! Chu Mu was shocked. If this attack had been used on a steel-shattering ankylosaurus, it would definitely have been able to cut open its armor and injure its body. However, against an earth-shattering ankylosaurus, it only left a white mark. Point kill. Chu Mu tried stabbing his sword again. The tyrannical power instantly penetrated the tough armor and entered the savage ankylosaurus body. However, the armor's defense was too shocking, causing the penetrating power to be greatly weakened. It was simply unable to cause any damage to the savage ankylosaurus body. Dual polarity won't work. Cutting moon is even worse. Even point kill and cut iron don't work. Chu Mu frowned as he dodged. If I can combine the mountain-shaking energy with the mountain-piercing energy and condense them into a single sword strike, I can use the mountain-shaking energy's characteristics to push it into the armor and cause damage to the armor. An idea emerged in Chu Mu's mind. The idea of combining the mountain-quaking force and mountain-piercing force into a single sword strike had long been in his mind. Chu Mu had also put in a lot of effort for this, but the results were minimal and he had yet to succeed. This time, when this idea popped up again, Chu Mu suddenly had a feeling that he would succeed this time. He leaped up and landed on the back of the savage ankylosaurus head. The savage ankylosaurus tail couldn't attack from this position. His body sank down and stood on the back of the savage ankylosaurus head, as if he had taken root. He held his breath and focused his mind on the sword in his hand. Immediately after, the muscles under his robe began to vibrate at a high frequency. Waves of powerful energy vibrated out, and the eight-sided desolate sky sword in his hand also vibrated at a high frequency under this energy. Gradually, under Chu Mu's full control, the sword slowly stopped vibrating. The vibrating energy was transferred from the outside to the inside. It seemed calm, but it was actually like a storm with surging undercurrents. Chu Mu's hand that was holding the sword was trembling slightly. The vibrating energy was constantly accumulating inside the sword, causing Chu Mu to expend a lot of energy to control it. He slowly raised the sword. When it was raised to a certain height, he suddenly slashed down. A clanging sound was heard and sparks flew. The powerful mountain-quaking force instantly penetrated the hard iron armor. The savage ankylosaurus charging figure suddenly stopped. The powerful inertia affected Chu Mu, causing the falling sword to move forward. The mountain-quaking force that penetrated the iron armor immediately dissipated. Failure! After stabilizing his body, Chu-Mu took a deep breath and adjusted again. Combining the mountain-quaking force and mountain-piercing force was equivalent to combining cutting iron and killing point. It was not that easy to create a new sword skill. He raised the sword again and slashed down again. This time, after some adjustments, it was even more perfect. A clanging sound was heard again and sparks flew. The powerful mountain-quaking force penetrated the iron armor and vibrated at a high speed, destroying the iron armor from the inside. With a pop, the savage Ankylosaurus was hit by the eight-sided Sky Desolation sword. A hole immediately appeared on the iron armor of the savage Ankylosaurus. Chu-Mu slashed again, enlarging the hole on the iron armor. He kicked his legs and jumped up high. With another slash, a dark golden crescent moon pierced through the air and hit the cracked iron armor. The body of the savage Ankylosaurus was not that strong under the iron armor. It was immediately split open by the dark golden crescent moon and blood spurted out. Once it was injured, the savage Ankylosaurus went crazy. The ground was trampled into pieces. It was extremely violent. Chu-Mu had to retreat temporarily. This sword is the initial combination of the mountain-quaking force and mountain-piercing force. In terms of power, it is a bit stronger than cutting iron, but the effect is completely different. It has an obvious destructive power on armor. Let's call it armor breaking. While avoiding the furious savage Ankylosaurus, Chu-Mu thought to himself and named the newly created sword skill. Blood kept gushing out from the head and back of the savage Ankylosaurus. Chu-Mu grasped the opportunity and used the armor-breaking sword to break another part of the iron armor. Then, he used dual polarity and instantly shot into the body of the savage Ankylosaurus. Under Chu-Mu's repeated attacks, the savage Ankylosaurus finally fell down and died. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 568. No wonder it is an earth-shattering level savage beast. Chu-Mu exclaimed as he looked at the bowl-sized yellowish-brown inner pellet after digging out the inner pellet from the savage Ankylosaurus. This bowl-sized inner pellet emitted a wave of savage beast energy that was several times purer and more powerful than the inner pellet of a steel-shattering level savage beast. If I were to cultivate with such an inner pellet, I would only need 10 of them to break through the initial stage of the Origin realm and enter the Deshang realm. Chu-Mu thought to himself after sensing the inner pellet. With a flip of his palm, the earth-shattering level savage beast inner pellet was stored in his interspatial ring. With this inner pellet I have passed the test. There are still 4 days left. Let me see if I can hunt more savage beasts. It would be better if I could continue to hunt earth-shattering level savage beasts. As Chu-Mu spoke, he left to find a place to recover his strength and Sky Baron sword energy. In the battle with the earth-shattering level savage Ankylosaurus, Chu-Mu had used all of his strength except for the buried sky secret sword. Moreover, his new sword skill, armor breaking, combined the mountain-shaking energy and the mountain-piercing energy into one sword. It was a huge burden on the body and mind. As for the inner pellet of the savage Ankylosaurus, it would be turned in as an item for the test, which was equivalent to giving it to the Sword Hunter Mansion. Time flowed like water. In the blink of an eye, 4 days had passed. Somewhere in the test area, which was originally empty, suddenly, a ray of light appeared as if the void had been torn apart. In the blink of an eye, it stretched into a glowing door. The portal had been opened. At the same time, a loud voice sounded above the test area like thunder. The portal has been opened. Return within 2 hours. The voice went silent. No matter what the swordsmen were doing, they all stopped and used their movement skills to rush towards the portal. Otherwise, once the portal closed, they would have to stay here for another half a year. It was very dangerous to stay in a place where they could encounter earth-shattering level savage beasts at any time. If they were not careful, they could die here. No one was willing to do that. Fortunately, the swordsmen who were still alive were silently calculating when the teleportation portal would open. Some of them had even arrived at the teleportation portal in advance and were waiting for it to open. It took Chu Mu more than an hour to arrive, just in time to see a figure rushing into the teleportation gate. He quickly flew towards the teleportation gate. Just as Chu Mu was about to rush into the portal, his heart trembled. A deadly sense of danger washed over him like a tidal wave. He hurriedly dodged to the side. Otherwise, he would definitely be hit before he entered the portal. Even if he didn't die, he would be injured. That tyrannical sword light pierced through the air, causing Chu Mu to feel a chill. "Count yourself lucky." A cold snort was transmitted into his ear, following which, a figure charged into the teleportation gate at high speed. In that instant, Chu Mu saw a pair of eyes that were filled with chilliness. Yang Lianfeng. Chu Mu stared at the teleportation gate and frowned slightly. He didn't know why Yang Lianfeng wanted to target him again and again. Since that was the case, Chu Mu wouldn't sit still and wait for death. He would repay Yang Lianfeng at the appropriate opportunity. In a flash, Chu Mu entered the teleportation gate. In the blink of an eye, he was back in the room of the Sword Hunter Mansion. An hour soon passed, and the portal disappeared, indicating that the trial had come to an end. 1, 2, 3. A total of 23 people returned. The white-robed elder, Elder Dong, appeared. He glanced at them and said indifferently, "Now, hand over the earth-shattering level savage beast's inner cores that you obtained. Once they pass the verification, you will pass the Sword Hunter assessment." Only 23 of the 113 people who entered came out alive. Chu Mu was secretly surprised. A total of 90 people might have died in the assessment. Even if there were a few who didn't die, it would be difficult for them to survive half a year in there. It could be seen that the mortality rate of the Sword Hunter assessment was very high. 7 inner cores. Elder Dong looked at the other swordsmen who didn't take out their inner cores. "What about you? You didn't succeed in killing the earth-shattering level savage beast?" The swordsmen who didn't take out their inner cores lowered their heads in shame. They didn't obtain the inner cores of the earth-shattering level savage beasts because they couldn't kill them alone. "Since that's the case, you can leave," Elder Dong said indifferently. The 16 swordsmen turned and walked out of the room, leaving only Elder Dong and the 7 swordsmen who took out their inner cores. Other than the 5 prodigies of the sacred city, there was also Chu Mu and another middle-aged swordsman who looked to be in his 40s. He looked ordinary and honest. "You can wait in the lounge next door," Elder Dong said and left with the 7 inner cores. "I finally passed the assessment." After Elder Dong left, the middle-aged swordsman clenched his fists and said excitedly, "Although the results weren't out yet, this time, he did kill an earth-shattering level savage beast alone with his own strength. If there were no accidents, he would definitely pass the assessment and become a sword hunter." In the lounge, Chu Mu and the others sat down. Yang Lianfeng coldly glanced at Chu Mu, while the others sized each other up. The 5 prodigies were familiar with each other, but there was competition between them. Therefore, their gazes weren't very friendly. "Brother, I'm called Fong Brick. What's your name?" The middle-aged man in his 40s sat next to Chu Mu and asked in a low voice. He didn't have a big backer and was alone. He couldn't be related to the 5 prodigies. After looking around, he chose the unfamiliar Chu Mu. "I'm Chu Mu." Chu Mu smiled and said, "Brother Chu, you look very young. You're not over 30 years old." Fong Brick was like a friendly person. He spoke frankly with assurance. "It should be your first time participating in the Sword Hunter assessment. You passed so quickly. You're really amazing." Chu Mu chuckled and didn't answer. "I've participated in this Sword Hunter assessment several times. This is the 6th time and I finally passed." Fong Brick was talking to Chu Mu, but he also seemed to be talking to himself. His tone was full of emotion, which made Chu Mu stunned. 6 times. He couldn't help but be surprised by Fong Brick's perseverance. Every sword hunter assessment was a gamble with one's life. If one wasn't careful, even swordsmen like the 5 prodigies could die. This Fong Brick had participated in a total of 6 times and survived each time. This time, he even passed the assessment. It had to be said that his obsession to become a sword hunter was very strong, far surpassing that of ordinary people. Fortunately, he should have passed this time. Otherwise, he would have participated in the 7th or 8th assessment until he died or passed. At this time, the white-robed old man, Elder Dong, entered the lounge. The smile on his face was very clear, making people feel that it was a joy from the bottom of his heart. Congratulations to all of you for passing the assessment and becoming a sword hunter. Elder Dong smiled and nodded to the 7 people. He had expected 6 people, but he didn't expect 7 people to pass. There were 5 more people than last time, which made him feel very proud. This is your sword hunter token. It contains your relevant information. You can use your spiritual thoughts to check it. Elder Dong waved his hand and 7 blue sword tokens flew in front of the 7 people. This is the elementary sword hunter token. You can complete the missions of the sword hunter mansion to obtain hunting points. After accumulating a certain amount, if you feel that you have enough strength, you can apply for the intermediate sword hunter assessment. Elementary sword hunter. Intermediate sword hunter. Then, there's advanced sword hunter. Chu Mu heard this and thought. After all, Zhao Keiming was just a small figure. He didn't know much about sword hunters. However, an intermediate sword hunter needs to have the strength to contend with or even kill a mountain-breaking wild beast. An advanced sword hunter needs to have the strength to contend with a star-shocking wild beast. Elder Dong's face revealed a faint smile. Mountain breaker level, star breaker level. The 7 people were surprised. Within 3 years, I will definitely become an advanced sword hunter. Yang Lianfeng clenched his fist and said loudly. Although the others didn't say anything, they each had their own thoughts. It's good to have ideas, but you can't bite off more than you can chew. Elder Dong glanced at Yang Lianfeng and said lightly. He had lived for hundreds of years and had seen all kinds of geniuses. Often, there were many geniuses who had fast progress in the early stage, but in the later stage, their potential was exhausted. It was almost impossible for them to make any progress. As for the promotion from elementary sword hunter to advanced sword hunter in 3 years, at least in the holy city of Wildlands, there had never been such an example. Thank you for your teachings, Elder. Yang Lianfeng's expression changed, and a humble look appeared on his face. However, he didn't have any humble thoughts in his heart. Elder Dong was old and experienced. How could he not see the little thoughts in Yang Lianfeng's heart? But with his identity, a reminder was enough. Well, little guys, from now on, you can enjoy all kinds of high-end resources in the holy city. Try your best to improve your strength. Elder Dong finally said. With a wave of his sleeve, he turned and walked out of the lounge. Chu Mu sank his spiritual consciousness into the elementary sword hunting sword token in his hand. Suddenly, he saw his information, name, age, hunting points, and so on. Chu Mu, do you dare to fight with me? Yang Lianfeng suddenly appeared in front of Chu Mu. His sharp aura was like a sword, locking on Chu Mu as he shouted coldly. The people who were about to leave suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yang Lianfeng and Chu Mu with an expectant smile on their faces. Time and place. Chu Mu's answer was very direct and surprising. Very good, you have some guts. Yang Lianfeng didn't expect Chu Mu to agree so directly. At first, he was stunned, but then he smiled coldly. I still have some things to do recently. I'm afraid it will take a few months. Then 1/2 a year later. Chu Mu said decisively. 1/2 a year later? Very good. Take advantage of this 1/2 a year and enjoy your last 1/2 a year. Yang Lianfeng laughed. If you don't dare to show up in 1/2 a year, As long as you are still in the holy city of Wildlands, I will find you even if I have to dig 3 feet into the ground. At that time, you will understand the taste of regret. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 569. Although Yang Lianfeng likes to be in the limelight, he's quite capable. However, I can't see through this swordsman called Chu Mu. Perhaps there'll be a fierce battle in half a year, Feng Qi said. Anyway, there'll be a good show in half a year, Su Xiaoxiao said happily. The 9 barbarians had a gentle smile on their faces, while Yi Wushuang looked indifferent, as if it had nothing to do with him. However, news of the battle between Chu Mu and Yang Lianfeng in half a year was spread out. Within a short period of time, almost all the swordsmen in the Saint City knew about it. Yang Lianfeng passed the sword hunter test. That's expected, but who is this Chu Mu? I heard that this swordsman called Chu Mu is still very young and is quite talented. Previously, he displayed the attack power of an ordinary sword venerable on the sword steel. At that time, he was only at the peak of the origin stage. Oh, it seems like this swordsman called Chu Mu has the ability to go against Yang Lianfeng. That's true, but this swordsman called Chu Mu is alone. There's still half a year before the battle. He might not even survive this half a year. Yang Lianfeng is favored by the Jade Sword Gang's leader. Now that he's a sword hunter, he'll definitely be heavily trained. In half a year, his strength will definitely soar. I have high hopes for him. There were all sorts of discussions in the Saint City. However, most of them had high hopes for Yang Lianfeng and not for Chu Mu. This was because they had no knowledge of Chu Mu, but they knew Yang Lianfeng better. Inside the Jade Sword Gang. He's going to have a battle with Lianfeng. Investigate this person immediately. If he's too big of a threat, eliminate him immediately, the Jade Sword Gang's leader said coldly. Yes. With the Sword Hunter token, Chu Mu had the right to enter the Wild Holy City as he wished. However, if he wanted to stay here for a longer period of time, it was best to buy a house. Fang Brick was very familiar with the Holy Wild City because he had been here for 7 or 8 years. It could be said that he was a living map of the Holy Wild City. He was even very familiar with many places in the ancient Wild Realm. After learning that Chu Mu had come to the Holy City of Wildlands by himself, Square Brick took the initiative to befriend Chu Mu. He seemed to have some conflict with Yang Lianfeng and the other 5 talents. This might have something to do with his past experiences. Under Fang Brick's guidance, Chu Mu quickly bought a property in a place that was neither too remote nor too busy. It was a small courtyard that covered an area of about 60 square meters. There was a room, a living room, and a small courtyard. This was just for living purposes. Chu Mu was alone, so he didn't need too much space. Even so, this property, which was only about 60 square meters in size, cost more than 6 million high-grade spirit stones. In the Wild Holy City, the price of property had always been high. The cheapest one cost 50,000 high-grade spirit stones per square meter, while the most expensive one went as high as 300,000 high-grade spirit stones per square meter. If it was 100 square meters, it would cost 30 million high-grade spirit stones. This was a price that most sword artists couldn't afford. Chu Mu could afford it, but to him, 30 million high-grade spirit stones wasn't a small amount. It wasn't worth it for him to buy such a property. In the Wild Holy City, the price of property was only related to the location and size. It didn't mean that the more expensive the property, the more beneficial it was for cultivation. Since that was the case, as long as the location wasn't too remote and the property wasn't too bad, Chu Mu could accept it. Because of the elementary sword hunter token, there was a 30% discount when buying property. Therefore, Chu Mu only needed to pay 4 million high-grade spirit stones. Brother Chu, you can be considered as someone who owns a house now. Fang Brick joked with a smile. If Brother Fang is willing, you can have one too, Chu Mu said. He already knew that Fong Brick had been living in the wild holy city for the past 7 or 8 years, and he had rented a house. Compared to buying a property, renting a house was much cheaper. "I'm used to renting a house." Fong Brick smiled and said, "It's better to use spirit stones in other places. It's more important to enhance one's strength." Fong Brick was able to survive in the wild holy city for 7 or 8 years, and even passed the sword hunter assessment 6 times. This had a great deal to do with his perseverance. Aside from renting a house, the other spirit stones could be used to enhance one's strength. Brother Chu, what's your next plan?" Fong Brick asked. "I'll go to the 10,000 killing array and the Enlightenment Pagoda," Chu said. "That's right. In half a year, Brother Chu will fight with Yang Lianfeng. You must increase your strength as much as possible during this time." Fong Brick nodded. "Brother Chu, how much do you know about the 10,000 killing array and the Enlightenment Pagoda?" "Brother Fong, please enlighten me," Chu said. "I wouldn't dare to enlighten you. I've been here for a long time, so I know more." Fong Brick laughed and said, "The 10,000 killing array is mainly for fighting. Inside the 10,000 killing array, your strength and sword essence will never be consumed. You can freely use sword skills, and it is an excellent place to hone your sword skills. The Enlightenment Pagoda can enhance your perception and enhance your comprehension of sword intent and profound meanings." Chu nodded. He felt that Fong Brick had not finished speaking. "The 10,000 killing array has no levels, and the Enlightenment Pagoda is divided into 3 levels. Sure enough," Fong Brick continued to say, "as long as you are a sword hunter, you can enter the 10,000 killing array. The first level of the Enlightenment Pagoda is suitable for primary sword hunters, the second level is suitable for intermediate sword hunters, and the third level is suitable for high-level sword hunters. It is said that the first level of the Enlightenment Pagoda can double one's perception, the second level can double it, and the third level can triple it." Triple perception. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a sharp light. His perception was amazing. Once it was increased by 3 times, what sort of terrifying level would he reach? Just thinking about it was terrifying. However, if he wanted to enter the 3rd level, he had to first become a high-level sword hunter. At that time, Chu Mu estimated that he would have already left the ancient, wild, desolate realm. A doubling of perception is also good. Thinking to himself, Chu Mu asked, "Are there any other conditions to enter the Dao Comprehension Pagoda or the 10,000 killing array?" "Of course there are. Becoming a sword hunter is only the standard to enter." Fong Brick was worthy of being called a veteran of the ancient wild sacred city. He explained, "You see the hunting points in the sword hunting command. It is said that if you want to enter the 10,000 killing array or the Enlightenment Pagoda, you must consume hunting points and spirit stones. As for how much you need, I'm not too clear." "So that's how it is." Chu Mu nodded. His sword hunting command had a hunting point of 100. This was the hunting point that every new sword hunter that passed the sword hunter assessment would obtain. If you want to know the hunting points required to enter the 10,000 killing array or the Enlightenment Pagoda, you will have to personally go there to find out. Fong Brick said, "It's better if we go together. It just so happens that I also want to understand." "Let's go." Under the guidance of Fong Brick, the living map of the ancient wild sacred city, Chu Mu took the shortest route to the 10,000 killing array. The 10,000 killing array was naturally managed by someone. After asking around, they learned that if they wanted to enter the 10,000 killing array, they needed to consume hunting points and spirit stones. Generally, it was high-grade spirit stones, and even top-grade spirit stones were fine. 2 hours will consume 100 hunting points and 100,000 high-grade spirit stones or 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. Chu Mu and Fong Brick couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. With this kind of consumption, even a rich sword hunter wouldn't be able to support it for a long time. And in a short period of cultivation, unless it was an accumulation of points, It was very unlikely that they would be able to achieve significant results. Then, they went to the Enlightenment Pagoda. After asking around, they learned that the Enlightenment Pagoda was the same as the 10,000 killing array. The first floor would consume 100 hunting points and 100,000 high-grade spirit stones or 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. As for the second floor, because Chu Mu and Fong Brick didn't have enough authority, they didn't know. It seems that we can only experience it for 2 hours. Fong Brick said with a helpless sigh. Let's go to the Sword Hunter Mansion to pick up some missions and earn some hunting points. Then we can directly enter the Enlightenment Pagoda or the 10,000 killing array. Chu Mu said. That's the only way. Fong Brick said with a sigh. Although it would take some time, they had a full understanding of the difficulty, and it would be beneficial for their future preparations. Chu Mu and Fong Brick arrived at the Sword Hunter Mansion. There were both regular missions and special missions. Regular missions were to hunt and kill at least earth-shattering level wild beasts. One could turn in the beast's body, core, and so on for hunting points. Generally, one wouldn't obtain too many hunting points. As for special missions, they were relatively rare, but once completed, one could obtain more hunting points. Although there were dozens of cores in the spatial ring, they were all from steel-shattering level wild beasts. They simply couldn't be exchanged for hunting points. If I want to absorb the power of these cores to practice, I can indeed improve my cultivation. I can probably reach the peak of small success, but it will take several months. Chu Mu thought, half a year from now I will fight Yang Lianfeng. I can only win, not lose, so half a year is very precious. I can't waste it on cultivation. Regular missions didn't need to be accepted. As long as they hunted earth-shattering level wild beasts or higher, they could directly turn in the point. As for special missions, he estimated that his luck wasn't good, and he didn't find a suitable one. Brother Chu, let's form a small team and hunt together. The harvest will be split 50-50, and the rest will belong to you. Fong Brick said. Okay. Chu Mu didn't hesitate and immediately agreed. With his current strength, hunting earth-shattering level wild beasts wasn't impossible, but the efficiency would be low. If he joined forces with Fong Brick, the efficiency would increase by more than 2 times, or even 3 times. As for the distribution method that Fong Brick mentioned, it was a very common distribution method. They would hunt together and divide equally. If an individual hunted a beast or found a treasure, it would belong to them. Of course, if he needed the other party's help, he would have to give a part of it to the other party as a reward. Even blood-related brothers had to settle accounts clearly. They had to make it clear in advance, so as to avoid looking for an excuse to have conflicts later. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 570. With a shoe sound, a blur broke through the air, leaving 3 clear trails behind. It was like a sword light, emitting a shocking sharpness. So fast. Chu Mu was suddenly ambushed, and he barely managed to dodge with his instincts. He felt that his protective sword aura was instantly sliced apart by the 3 beams of light. It was even more fragile than tofu. It's an earth-shattering level barbaric clawed dragon. Fong Brick's expression turned serious. For swordsmen, the barbaric clawed dragon was one of the few beasts that they didn't want to encounter in the ancient wild realm. Most of the beasts had very obvious characteristics. For example, the barbaric T-Rex had a huge body and unparalleled strength, but it was relatively slow. The barbaric Ankylosaurus, on the other hand, was weak in terms of speed and strength, but its iron armor gave it a shocking defense. The barbaric clawed dragon was different from the barbaric Tyrannosaurus and barbaric Ankylosaurus. They were usually small in size. Even the earth-shattering level barbaric clawed dragon was no more than 10 meters tall. However, one shouldn't underestimate the barbaric clawed dragon just because of its small size, because its specialty was speed. The barbaric clawed dragon was extremely fast, and its claws were extremely sharp. The claws of a steel-crushing barbaric clawed dragon were comparable to a royal-grade sword. The claws of an earth-shattering barbaric clawed dragon were twice as sharp. They were not inferior to the best royal-grade sword. Moreover, the barbaric clawed dragon's claws seemed to have some special characteristics. It was a bit like armor-piercing. Even the barbaric ankylosaurus iron armor couldn't withstand the barbaric clawed dragon's claws. It was very frustrating to fight against a barbaric clawed dragon because it was extremely fast. It was so fast that many swordsmen didn't even have time to react before its claws had already reached them. The barbaric clawed dragon was different from the barbaric tyrannosaurus. It was more cunning, and once it felt that it wasn't a match for its target, it would use its speed to escape. More importantly, most of the time, the barbaric clawed dragons lived in groups. Once they were surrounded, it was very difficult to deal with. Dozens of steel-shattering level barbaric clawed dragons could easily kill an earth-shattering level barbaric ankylosaurus or barbaric tyrannosaurus. Swordsmen who entered the ancient wild realm to hunt did not wish to encounter the savage clawed dragon. If he couldn't win, he would die. If he could win, he could run away. If he ran into a group of mandrill clawed dragons, it would be even more dangerous. He would most likely die under the claws of the mandrill clawed dragons and be torn into pieces. It was hard to tell if Chu Mu and Square Brick were lucky or unlucky because they had encountered a barbaric clawed dragon. However, there was only one so far. Brother Chu, you have to kill this manic clawed dragon as fast as you can. Otherwise, it will attract a bunch of manic clawed dragons if it escapes, Fong Brick said urgently. Compared to the Brick, Chu Mu's understanding of the ancient savage desolate realm was not deep enough. The barbaric clawed dragon was extremely fast. After missing its attack, it rushed forward for 10 meters. It immediately turned around and used its sharp claws to attack again. The air was torn apart, forming a vacuum blade. Chu Mu squinted his eyes and used his perfect vision to see the mandrill clawed dragon's body. The mandrill clawed dragon's movement and the trajectory of its claws were also displayed in Chu Mu's eyes. With a slight step, Chu Mu dodged the mandrill clawed dragon's claws by a hair's breadth. The sky desolate sword was unsheathed. The sky desolate sword sliced through the flesh like cutting through leather. The sky desolate sword was extremely powerful. Although the mandrill clawed dragon's skin was tough, it was still not as tough as a barbaric tyrannosaurus, not to mention the mandrill clawed dragon's armor. The sky desolate sword sank into the mandrill clawed dragon's body. With the mandrill clawed dragon's high-speed movement and the opposing force, the sky desolate sword sliced off one of the mandrill clawed dragon's legs. The mandrill clawed dragon lost its balance after losing one of its legs. It instantly fell to the ground and rushed forward for more than 10 meters. Dust was rolling in the air as the sky desolate sword's blood gushed out from the mandrill clawed dragon's leg. The mandrill clawed dragon let out a series of mournful cries. Fang Chui's expression changed drastically as he rushed forward and raised his sword. He performed his sword skill. The huge golden sword light was solid as it sliced off the mandrill clawed dragon's head. Get the inner core now. Fang Chui was still shocked by Chu Mu's sword attack. However, at this moment, he understood the danger even more. He could only suppress the shock in his heart for the time being. Fang Chui skillfully took out the inner core from the mandrill clawed dragon's body and quickly put it into his spatial bracelet. He then looked at Chu Mu and yelled, "Brother Chu, leave this place now." As he spoke, Fang Chui performed his movement skill and dashed into the distance. Although he was confused, Chu Mu also performed his movement skill and followed Fang Chui. "Brother Fang, why are you so scared?" Chu Mu asked after Fang Chui slowed down after running at full speed for about an hour. That mandrill clawed dragon was calling for its companions. If we left a little later, we might be surrounded by the mandrill clawed dragons. At that time, it would be almost impossible for us to escape from a group of mandrill clawed dragons. Feng Shui exhaled heavily and explained. I see. Chu Mu nodded. He shuddered when he imagined dozens or even dozens of earth-shattering mandrill-clawed dragons chasing after them. The earth-shattering mandrill-clawed dragons were extremely fast. Even Chu Mu's perfect vision sword could not see them clearly. If it were only 2 or 3 earth-shattering mandrill-clawed dragons, Chu Mu would not be afraid with his super-fast reaction and perfect vision sword. Although the mandrill-clawed dragons were fast and their claws were sharp, it would be fine as long as they did not get hit. On the contrary, if they could attack the mandrill-clawed dragons, they would be able to injure them. This was different from when they fought the mandrill-clawed dragons. For example, the mandrill-clawed dragon that Chu Mu had just injured was only 6 or 7 meters tall and did not have a strong defense. If there were only 1 or 2 earth-shattering mandrill-clawed dragons, they would be the best targets. Chu Mu thought to himself. His advantage and talent gave him this ability. Brother Chu, we have been in the ancient wild region for a month. In this month, we have hunted more than 200 steel-shattering giant barbaric beasts and 63 earth-shattering giant barbaric beasts. Our harvest is many times more than what I have hunted alone. Fang Brick said in a negotiating tone to Chu Mu, in my opinion, why don't we go back to the ancient wild city to take a rest and hand in the inner elixir and other materials of the earth-shattering giant barbaric beasts for hunting points? All right. Chu Mu thought for a while and nodded in agreement. Since the discussion was over, the next step was naturally to return to the ancient wild city. On the way back, they met many hunting teams. Some of them would greet Fang Brick. It could be seen that Fang Brick knew many people in the ancient wild city. The two of them took out their beginner sword hunting tokens and easily entered the ancient wild city. They went straight to the sword hunting mansion. Exchanging for hunting points, Fang Brick walked directly to the mission counter and took out the materials and inner elixirs of the earth-shattering giant barbaric beasts from the space bracelet with Chu Mu. In this month of hunting, the materials they obtained were basically all broken down by the square brick. His technique was much more proficient than Chu Mu's, but the materials and inner cores obtained from the process were all split equally to avoid unnecessary conflicts. After a round of calculation, the 63 earth-shattering giant barbaric beasts materials were worth more than 700 hunting points. The 63 inner elixirs were worth even more, totaling 6,800 hunting points. When exchanging for the materials or inner elixirs of the giant barbaric beasts, the strength of the giant barbaric beasts had to be tested. The more powerful the giant barbaric beasts were, the more valuable they were. The total is 7,530 hunting points. We'll split it half, Fang Brick said. Immediately, the relevant personnel divided the hunting points equally and transferred them to Chu Mu and Fang Brick's beginner sword hunting tokens. Chu Mu checked and found that the hunting points had increased from 100 to 3,865. Haha, not bad. After a month of hard work, I finally got something. Fang Brick was very happy. Let's go, Brother Chu. I'll treat you to a drink. This drink can wait. I'm going to the Enlightenment Pagoda to meditate, Chu Mu said with a smile. Brother Chu, you're really a cultivation maniac. But it's no wonder. With such a cultivation attitude, you can achieve more in a short time. Fang Brick shook his head and sighed. Well, I'll treat you to a drink after you defeat Yang Lianfeng. At that time, it'll be a celebratory drink. After a month of hunting giant barbaric beasts together, Fang Brick had a certain understanding of Chu Mu's strength. Therefore, he felt that in half a year, Chu Mu might not lose to Yang Lianfeng. It could be said that other than Chu Mu, Fang Brick was the first person who thought highly of Chu Mu. If other swordsmen knew about this, they would most likely sneer. Okay. Chu Mu nodded and turned to leave the sword hunting mansion. As for Fang Brick, he also left the sword hunting mansion, but he went to the attack power testing sword steel. He hadn't tested in a long time, and he felt that his strength had improved recently. He wanted to see how the attack power of his sword skills was. The two of them didn't talk about teaming up to hunt giant barbaric beasts because they weren't sure when the next time would be. Each of them had their own things to do. After a period of time, Chu Mu came to the Enlightenment Pagoda again. After a month, he came to inquire about the Enlightenment Pagoda. This time, he wanted to enter the Enlightenment Pagoda to meditate. "Let's meditate for 20 hours first," Chu Mu said. 20 hours meant 1,000 hunting points and 1 million top-grade spirit stones, which was nothing to Chu Mu. Even if he didn't have enough spirit stones, he could sell some treasures, such as the hundreds of steel-level giant barbaric beasts' inner cores or cultivation methods and swords in his space ring. In short, Chu Mu didn't lack spirit stones. What he lacked was hunting points. You must come out after 20 hours. If you exceed the time limit, you'll have to pay extra hunting points and spirit stones. Otherwise, the consequences will be serious. The swordsman guarding the Enlightenment Pagoda warned. Chu Mu nodded and walked into the Enlightenment Pagoda. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for it at Chidian.com. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 571. There were a total of 3 floors in the Enlightenment Pagoda, and each floor was divided into many rooms. After all, one could not be disturbed during meditation. Therefore, it was best for each person to have their own room. Furthermore, every room was filled with seals. These seals were mostly defensive seals, soundproofing seals, and aura-shielding seals, so as to prevent any negative effects from occurring. There were many rooms on the first floor. Chu Mu walked into one of them and locked the door. The room was not big, probably a dozen square meters. There was a futon in the middle. Other than that, there was nothing else. It could be described as 4 bare walls. The light was very dim, and the surrounding walls were a little blurry. However, this was not the main point. The main point was that as soon as he entered, Chu Mu had a feeling that all the distracting thoughts in his mind had automatically disappeared. It had become unprecedentedly clear, and his thoughts were clear. With a slight thought, he could think of something. This speed was like a tractor being replaced with a sports car. It was extremely refreshing. Chu Mu took a deep breath, walked to the futon in the middle, and sat down cross-legged. He did not need to do anything. He could naturally enter a state of meditation. A twofold increase in comprehension does not refer to a twofold increase in the speed of comprehension. For people with high comprehension, a twofold increase may increase the speed of comprehension by 10 times or even higher. My comprehension is very high. With a twofold increase, no matter what I comprehend, the speed will increase by at least dozens of times. 2 hours is equivalent to dozens of hours of comprehension in the outside world. Moreover, the environment here is more conducive to comprehension, and the effect is better than the outside world. In this way, 2 hours here is equivalent to hundreds of hours in the outside world. How could Chu Mu waste such a good opportunity? It was an unprecedented state of emptiness. It was as if the world had disappeared, and even he had disappeared. Only his spiritual consciousness was constantly strengthening. The spiritual world was evolving, as if it had become a real world. In this world, Chu Mu was the ruler, the supreme god. Everything was under his control. The comprehension of sword intent was the most important, and he was familiar with it. In addition, he had been constantly fighting and accumulating potential in the Enlightenment Pagoda. The effect was particularly good. When Chu Mu woke up, he felt as if a second had passed. My sword intent has reached 56%. Not bad. The power of my sword skills should have increased as well. The excellent effect made Chu Mu reluctant to leave. He calculated that he still had more than 2,800 hunting points in his elementary sword hunting token. He could still study for another 48 hours. As for the spiritual stones, he didn't need to worry about them. The reason why my sword intent could reach 56% in just 20 hours is not only because of the Enlightenment Pagoda, but also because of my own accumulation. If I want to improve it quickly, it will be very difficult. I might as well try to comprehend other profound, such as the laceration profound, the illusory profound, the water profound, and the fire profound. There isn't enough time. If I want to raise my strength as soon as possible, I can only choose. Chu Mu suddenly stopped, because he suddenly thought of the reverse air steps. The inverse space steps was a new footwork technique that was derived from the flying swan illusory space step. It was more profound than the flying swan illusory space steps, but it was also more difficult to cultivate than the flying swan illusory space step. Up until now, Chu Mu had yet to truly master it. But during that month of hunting giant savage beasts, the inverse space steps had played a role many times, turning danger into safety and killing giant savage beasts instead. Chu Mu felt that the inverse space steps definitely contained an extremely profound mystery. If he could comprehend a part of it, not only would he truly master the inverse space steps, but it would also increase his strength. It would be even more beneficial for him in the future. With a period of accumulation and comprehension, I don't believe that I can't comprehend anything. Since he had made up his mind, Chu Mu began to comprehend the inverse space steps with all his might. The comprehension of the inverse space steps was different from the comprehension of the sword intent mysteries. It required one to personally use it and slowly experience the changes within. Thus, Chu Mu was in the Tao comprehending pagoda. From time to time, he would use reverse air step. His figure was like a ghost. One breath he would be here and the next he would appear in another place. It was impossible to defend against. However, using the inverse space steps consumed a lot of energy. Even if Chu Mu's cultivation had increased, he couldn't continuously use it. Thus, he would only use it once or twice, stopping to carefully comprehend it before using it once or twice more. After a few hours, Chu Mu had already used the inverse space step a few dozen times and had some comprehension. He sat back down on the praying mat and slowly closed his eyes. Everything disappeared again, and only his mental world continued to expand and expand. A figure appeared in his spiritual world and began to move, using the inverse space step. Time slowly passed, and in the blink of an eye, several hours had passed. So that's how it is. This inverse space steps contains a unique power, a bit like a concept. It had to be said that being able to create the inverse space steps through the flying swan illusory steps was due to Chu Mu's heaven-defying luck. Since it was clear, there was more direction to comprehend it. The inverse space steps is only a medium. Comprehending the power contained within is the true path. If the inverse space steps contains some kind of concept, then what kind of concept should it be? The 5 elements concept, thunder concept, ice concept, wind concept, and cloud concept. I've comprehended all of them, and they are different from the inverse space step. The inverse space steps concept gives me a feeling that it is more profound and mysterious than the 5 elements concept. Even compared to the ripping concept, it surpasses it. This concept has a kind of aura of emptiness, a feeling of emptiness. A light suddenly flashed in Chu Mu's mind, and a smile appeared on Chu Mu's face. I know. This concept should be the legendary concept of emptiness. In this world, there were many kinds of concept. The common ones were the 5 elements concepts: wind, ice, thunder, cloud, and so on. There were also variations based on the common concepts, as well as some special concept. Even if they were all concepts, there were differences in strength. For example, among the common concepts, the thunder concept and the ice concept were slightly stronger than the other concept. And among the many concepts, there was one that was recognized as the strongest: the concept of time. Second only to the concept of time was the concept of emptiness. Because there were too few swordsmen that could comprehend the concept of emptiness, there were only a few throughout history. Therefore, it was crowned as a legend. As for the concept of time, it wasn't that no one had comprehended it since ancient times, but it was even rarer than the concept of emptiness. Chu Mu never imagined that the inverse space steps that he had comprehended by chance would actually contain such a powerful concept as the concept of emptiness. If others were to know, who knew how envious and jealous they would be. If I can comprehend the concept of emptiness, not only will the inverse space steps power increase, but it will also have a great impact on my future achievements. Inwardly excited, Chu Mu took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Then, he started to comprehend once more. There were still over 20 hours left, and Chu Mu firmly believed that he would be able to comprehend the concept of emptiness. The power of emptiness was everywhere. Compared to other concepts, it had more contact with people, but the concept of emptiness was one of the hardest concepts to comprehend. Emptiness is by my side, accompanying me all the time. The power of emptiness is circling around me endlessly. But what is emptiness? What is the concept of emptiness? Chu Mu's comprehension ability had increased tremendously, and his comprehension ability and speed had increased by close to 100 times. Under such circumstances, he was still unable to comprehend the concept of emptiness in a short period of time. On one hand, it was because the concept of emptiness was very profound, and on the other hand, it was because Chu Mu had comprehended quite a few concepts. If it wasn't for the increase in his cultivation and the continuous development of his soul, causing his comprehension ability to increase, Chu Mu probably wouldn't have been able to comprehend it no matter how much time he spent. Hour after hour passed. Suddenly, Chu Mu caught a trace of an unusual fluctuation. His sharp mind was able to follow it and catch it to comprehend. So that's how it is. This is the power of emptiness, the power of the concept of emptiness. Suppressing the joy in his heart, he used this trace of concept of emptiness to deepen his comprehension. With a beginning, it was like opening a door. Following the path, he continued to walk until he reached the end. Although the process was very difficult, since he had already started, it was much better. In the blink of an eye, more than 40 hours had passed. Chu Mu suddenly woke up from his comprehension. Checking the time, he realized that he had been in the Enlightenment Tower for 32 hours. There are still 2 hours left. Let's stop here. Getting up, Chu Mu walked out of the door, opened it, and walked out of the Enlightenment Tower. This time's comprehension not only allowed my sword intent to reach 55%, but also allowed me to comprehend the concept of emptiness. Although it's only 30%, with more hunting points, I can continue to comprehend the concept of emptiness in the Enlightenment Tower. I can quickly comprehend the concept of emptiness to perfection, and then break through to the abstruse of emptiness. At that time, my power will definitely increase greatly. After calculating, he had deducted another 2,700 hunting points and 2,700,000 upper-grade spirit stones. Chu Mu walked towards the house he had bought. He planned to rest for a day, and then continue to go out of the city into the ancient wild realm to hunt earth-shattering level beasts. This time, he planned to act alone. Compared to a month ago, Chu Mu's strength had clearly increased. He believed that as long as it wasn't an overly powerful earth-shattering rank savage beast, he could kill it by himself. Moreover, he would have more freedom to move alone. First, he went to the Sword Hunter Mansion. Chu Mu wanted to see if there were any suitable missions for him. Once he arrived at the Sword Hunting Mansion, Chu Mu discovered that there were many swordsmen gathered inside. A dozen or so of them were gathered in front of the special mission board, discussing. Chu Mu walked over in large strides to take a look, and his eyes slightly lit up because he saw a suitable special mission. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 572. Special Mission. Assist the employer in breaking into the desolate Dragonclaw tribe. The employer will receive 1,000 hunting points as a deposit, and the beasts killed during the mission will belong to the employer. At the end of the mission, the employer will receive 4,000 hunting points as a reward. 5,000 hunting points in total. If I include the rewards during the mission, it might even exceed 5,000. Chumu pondered for a bit. I'll accept this mission. Immediately, Chumu walked towards the special mission window, took out his beginner sword hunting token, and selected to accept this special mission. After that, Chumu left the sword hunting mansion and returned to the small courtyard he bought to rest. The gathering time for this mission was tomorrow morning. Hello everyone, I am Guyu. A clear and gentle voice sounded. Its owner was a male swordsman wearing a light green robe, emitting a natural and elegant aura. He looked like he was less than 30 years old, but he also looked like he was in his 30s. He was at the peak of the origin realm. Along with Guyu were 3 other swordsmen, 2 women and 1 man. All of them were at the peak of the origin realm, Deshang. They were all elites among the beginner sword hunters. Guyu, it's actually him. Below, the swordsmen who were hired began to discuss in low voices. It seemed that this Guyu was quite famous. Chumu listened for a bit and roughly understood that this Guyu was quite a famous person. A few years ago, his status in the desolate sacred city was like the 5 talents. However, there were only 4 of them back then, so they were called the 4 talents. Guyu had successfully passed the first sword hunter exam. After that, he used almost 4 years to pass the intermediate sword hunter exam, becoming an even more powerful intermediate sword hunter. Most importantly, Guyu didn't belong to the Barbarian Sword Association or the Ancient Desolation Building. He only created his own hunting team. Including himself, there were a total of 4 members, and every one of them was an elite. The hunting team Guyu created was called the Blood Ray Team, and it was quite famous in the desolate sacred city. The Barbarian Sword Association and the Ancient Desolation Building had sent him invitations, but Guyu had rejected them. Interestingly, the Barbarian Sword Association and the Ancient Desolation Building didn't do anything to Guyu after being rejected. Therefore, many people guessed that Guyu's background wasn't simple, and that he must have a powerful backer. All of these made Guyu a well-known figure in the sacred wild city. I'm very happy. There are 12 people who have accepted this mission. Please take out your sword hunting token. I will transfer 1,000 hunting points to you as a deposit. Guyu smiled. Including Chumu, a total of 12 swordsmen had accepted this special mission, but they were all beginner swordsmen. After taking back the sword hunt token, Chumu found that there were 1,000 more hunting points in it. Alright, now that all of you have accepted the deposit from the Bloodlight Squad, it means that all of you have accepted our employment. Guyu was the captain of the Bloodlight Squad, so naturally, he was the one speaking. The other 3 members remained silent. Sir Guyu, since we've already accepted the employment of the Bloody Man Group, shouldn't you tell us the details of this mission? A senior junior sword hunter said. He wasn't afraid to speak just because Guyu was an intermediate sword hunter. Of course, this mission won't be easy, but risks often coexist with benefits. Guyu said, Everyone, let's set off now. On the way, I will explain this mission to you in detail. A total of 16 swordsmen left the wild holy city and entered the enormous wild ancient region. Along the way, Guyu explained the mission in detail to Chumu and the other 12 primary sword hunters who had been hired. Guyu didn't explain their specific objective, but Chumu and the rest's mission was to tie down the savage clawed dragons of the savage clawed dragon tribe, allowing the Bloody Ray team to successfully break into the central nest of the savage clawed dragon tribe and obtain the items they needed. After that, they would tie down the savage clawed dragons, allowing the Bloody Ray team to successfully escape from the savage clawed dragon tribe. As long as the Bloody Mang team successfully leaves the savage dragon claw tribe, your mission will be completed. Once you reach a safe place, you will be rewarded with 4,000 hunting points. Guyu finally said. Hearing Guyu's words, it seemed that the difficulty of the mission wasn't very high. Because the mission was to restrain the barbaric clawed dragons and let the bloody Mang team break into the central nest of the tribe, there was a clear difference between the difficulty of this mission and exterminating the barbaric clawed dragons. Sir Guyu, may I know the scale of this savage clawed dragon tribe? It was still that senior primary sword hunter. In the savage ancient realm, there were tribes formed by savage giant beasts, especially savage giant beasts that lived in groups like the savage clawed dragons. The scale of the tribes varied. The small ones might only have a few dozen savage giant beasts, while the large ones might have hundreds or even thousands of savage giant beasts. With their strength, of course, it wouldn't be a problem for them to deal with a small tribe. However, if it was a large tribe with hundreds of savage clawed dragons, then it would be a little difficult. Guyu suddenly became silent and didn't immediately answer. This made the hearts of the primary sword hunters jump. It's a medium-sized savage clawed dragon tribe. According to our investigation, there are about 300 savage clawed dragons. Guyu pondered for a moment and said, medium-sized. 300 savage giant beasts. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. Although 300 savage clawed dragons was a lot, their mission was only to tie them down. Therefore, they wouldn't have to face that many savage clawed dragons. It was an acceptable range. After all, if they went out to hunt earth-shattering savage giant beasts, it would take them at least 2 to 3 months to obtain 5,000 savage points, or even longer. Now that they could obtain 5,000 savage points by completing a special mission, it would be impossible to say that there was no danger. In this tribe, there are more than 200 steel-shattering savage clawed dragons, and about 60 earth-shattering savage clawed dragons. Guyu added. Everyone nodded. Steel-shattering savage clawed dragons weren't a threat to them. As long as they didn't face more than 10 of them at the same time, as sword hunters with rich hunting experience, they wouldn't let themselves be surrounded by more than 10 steel-shattering savage clawed dragons. However, they should pay attention to those 60 earth-shattering savage clawed dragons. Sir Guyu, if it's only this strength, I'm afraid that your Bloody Ray team should be able to complete it after spending some time and effort. It was that senior primary sword hunter again. This is a serious matter. We need to preserve enough strength. Guyu explained simply. This was the rule. The employee had to tell them everything that they needed to know. Otherwise, the employee had the right to reject the job and not return the deposit. However, if the employee rejected the job after they had done their homework, not only would they have to return the deposit, they would also have to pay double the compensation. This was the rule set by the Sword Hunter Mansion. There had been people who had violated this rule before, and they had been disqualified from being a sword hunter and banished from the wild sacred city. Basically, they had understood everything that they needed to know. Although they were curious about the purpose of the Bloody Ray team, it wasn't within the scope of the mission. If Guyu didn't want to tell them, they couldn't force them to ask. 16 swordsmen, 1 mid-level sword hunter, and 15 primary-level sword hunters quickly ran across the vast land of the wild ancient region. With Guyu leading the way, they headed towards their target, the savage clawed dragon tribe. Among the 16 swordsmen, Chu Mu had the lowest cultivation, only at the mid-level of the origin realm. The rest were basically at the mid-level of the origin realm. Deshang and Deshang were at the peak level of the origin realm. However, no one dared to underestimate Chu Mu. Being able to pass the test and become a primary-level sword hunter at the mid-level of the origin realm was enough to prove that Chu Mu's potential and talent were above theirs. They could only befriend such a person. Even if they couldn't befriend him, they couldn't become his enemy either. After running for about 4 hours in the wild ancient region, avoiding some powerful savage beasts and getting rid of the weaker ones, Guyu, who was at the front, finally stopped. In front of them was a stone forest. Rocks were scattered all over the place, covering a huge area. Chu Mu and the rest could see shadows appearing and disappearing between the rocks. They were moving very fast, but they were still able to tell that they were savage clawed dragons. That is our target. Most of the savage clawed dragons in the outer area are steel-shattering level savage clawed dragons. Only when we enter the inner area will there be earth-shattering level savage clawed dragons. Guyu said seriously, when we move out later, try to hide your aura as much as possible. Don't disturb the steel-shattering level savage clawed dragons. Once we enter the inner area, we will need you to restrain the earth-shattering level savage clawed dragons. If there are any steel-shattering level savage clawed dragons, you will also need to restrain them. Since we have accepted the mission, we will naturally do our best. It would be a lie to say that there is no danger in this mission. If we are not careful, we might lose our lives. Therefore, we will need everyone to bring out their true strength and cooperate with us wholeheartedly. Guyu said again with a serious expression. Cold lightning shot out from his eyes. If any one of you makes a mistake that leads to an accident and implicates the others, I think it will not end well for you. It sounded like a threat, but no one refuted it. This was a matter of life and death. No one wanted to lose their lives because of someone else's carelessness. Everyone looked at each other seriously, as if they wanted to remember each other. Everyone, I hope this is not our last cooperation. That senior primary sword hunter said. Of course. If anyone drops the ball, I won't let him off. A swordsman threatened in a gloomy voice. Don't worry, no one is that stupid. Everyone looked at Chu Mu. Chu Mu did not say anything, and only nodded seriously. All right, everyone restrain your aura, Guyu said. The aura on his body immediately retracted, as if it had disappeared. As a sword hunter-level sword hunter in the ancient savage desolate realm, they all had their own methods to restrain their aura. Moreover, none of them were weak. The aura on their bodies began to weaken. However, some were fast and some were slow. However, there was a process that would take at least 3 breaths. Chu Mu's aura was instantly retracted. If they did not see him standing right next to them, they would not have noticed it. This caused everyone to be shocked. They did not dare to underestimate Chu Mu. Even Guyu was shocked. Looking deeply at Chu Mu, Guyu said, Everyone, let's begin. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 573. Obviously, Guyu had already explored this place and set the route. The swordsmen, who had concealed their aura, used the rocks as cover to avoid the steel-shattering barbaric clawed dragons, and sneaked in. Among all of them, Chu Mu was the most relaxed. On one hand, it was because of his temperament. On the other hand, Chu Mu's hidden edge art was extraordinary. Even Guyu's aura concealing martial art couldn't compare with it. Chu Mu's expression naturally fell into the eyes of the others, which made them secretly surprised. Any martial art that could conceal one's aura had a limit. Even when they were so close to the other party, they could still feel a slight aura fluctuation. However, they couldn't sense Chu Mu's aura fluctuation at all. Even if Guyu's cultivation was much higher than Chu Mu's, he still couldn't do it. If they didn't look at Chu Mu, they wouldn't know where he was just by sensing his aura. What a profound martial art! They all sighed inwardly. Each of them had their own thoughts, but at this moment no one showed it. After dodging for an hour, the group finally managed to enter the inner area. The interior of the stone forest was different. At first glance, it was empty. There was only a stone nest in the middle. Hiding behind a huge rock, everyone stared at the stone nest. About 10,000 meters. Without any concealment, I can only use my full speed. But with the reaction and speed of the earth-shattering barbaric clawed dragons, they will attack in an instant. Chu Mu calculated silently. 10,000 meters was nothing to a primary realm swordsman. If they used their full speed, they would be able to cross it in 10 breaths of time. But the problem was that the earth-shattering barbaric clawed dragons had a faster reaction speed. Because in this open space, apart from the stone nest in the middle, there were dozens of barbaric clawed dragons either walking or lying on the ground. Each of them was more than 5 meters tall. The aura they emitted made it clear that these dozens of barbaric clawed dragons were earth-shattering barbaric clawed dragon. Moreover, there would be barbaric clawed dragons entering and exiting the stone nest from time to time. Chu Mu and the others even saw a 10-meter-tall barbaric clawed dragon, which was already at the peak of the earth-shattering barbaric clawed dragon. Only Gu Yu had the confidence to deal with it. Gu Yu was not in a hurry to take action. Instead, he was observing the movement patterns of the 60-plus earth-shattering savage clawed dragons, looking for the best opportunity. Although Chu Mu and the other beginner sword hunters were helping to hold back the barbaric clawed dragon, they still had to be careful. It would be best if they could achieve their goal with the least cost. Time passed by slowly. As sword hunters, all of them were very patient. "Get ready." Gu Yu gestured to remind everyone, and everyone raised their concentration to 120%. Their eyes became sharp, and their muscles tensed up, ready to erupt with astonishing strength and speed at any time. Just as Gu Yu's hand was about to descend, a gigantic sword beam rose into the sky like the rising sun. Like a surging red sun, it emitted an astonishing heat and temperature, as if it wanted to melt the boulders and earth. The temperature in the air rose by several tens of degrees in a single breath. Even Chu Mu and the others could feel the enormous change in temperature in the air. Gu Yu's reaction was quick, as he hurriedly changed his hand gesture, telling everyone to stay hidden, not to move, and to continue observing. That sword beam with a diameter of more than 10 meters was like a rolling wheel as it rushed towards the resting earth-shattering savage clawed dragons. The speed of the sword beam was very fast, and the temperature was even higher. Wherever it passed, the sand and stones on the ground would melt into liquid, leaving behind an astonishing gully. Those earth-shattering savage clawed dragons had just reacted and were about to dodge, but because of the pressure of the sword beam, they were a bit slower and were immediately hit. In an instant, 4 earth-shattering savage clawed dragons that were 6 to 7 meters tall exploded with a boom. Their flesh and blood scattered everywhere, and every piece of flesh that exploded was charred black. Half of them had turned into charcoal. Roar! The remaining savage clawed dragons were all furious, and their killing intent surged. All of them rushed towards the direction where the sword beam came from. Dozens of earth-shattering savage clawed dragons launched their attacks. Their speed was extremely fast, and only a series of afterimages could be seen breaking through the sky. The steel-shattering savage clawed dragons on the periphery also seemed to have received the order, and rushed over from the periphery. The ground shook slightly, and a tyrannical aura surged, as if a calm sea suddenly had a huge wave. "Kill!" A shout filled with killing intent exploded like a sudden clap of thunder, and it spread out in all directions, causing the huge rocks to tremble. The killing intent was like a tide, and it was so dense that it was almost tangible, suffocating people. In the next moment, one figure after another shot out like an arrow from a bow, and the air was torn apart with a sharp sound. The sword light was like a scorching sun, a shooting star, and a river of water. It was either fierce, majestic, or filled with killing intent. Each of them locked onto an earth-shattering savage clawed dragon, and their sword skills exploded. "It's the Mad Slaughter Team." Gu Yu's face turned ugly, and the other 3 members of the Bloody Red Team also had ugly expressions. This was because this Mad Slaughter Team had clashed with the Bloody Red Team many times. The Mad Slaughter Team was originally an independent team, but they were later recruited by the Jade Sword Gang, and had a subordinate relationship with the Jade Sword Gang. The captain of the Mad Slaughter Team, Sha Kuang, was also an intermediate sword hunter. The members of the team were originally about the same as the Bloody Red Team, but after being recruited by the Jade Sword Gang, they expanded to a total of 7 members, and all of them were beginner sword hunters. It was Sha Kuang who had unleashed the scorching sun sword light to kill the 4 earth-shattering savage clawed dragons. "Captain, this is a good opportunity," a member of the Bloody Red Team said in a low voice. At this moment, the savage clawed dragons were all attracted by the Mad Slaughter Team, and did not pay attention to them at all. "No, wait," Guyu said coldly. Even though he was furious, he did not lose his mind. The 7 members of the Mad Slaughter team all arrived at the scene and began to fight the savage-clawed dragons. Sha Kuang was a muscular man with a full beard. He wielded a heavy longsword with both hands. His speed was not fast, but his strength was great. Every time he swung his sword, he would definitely injure or kill an earth-shattering savage-clawed dragon. To Sha Kuang, only Mountain Breaker-class savage beasts could contend with him. These were all earth-shattering savage-clawed dragons. Even though they were faster than Sha Kuang was always able to dodge their attacks and counterattack at the most critical moment. As for the 6 members of the Mad Slaughter team, they formed a sword formation called the Outer Hexagonal Sword Formation. The 6 of them formed a sword formation facing the outside, which was the best way to deal with a siege. The Mad Slaughter team was very experienced in dealing with savage-clawed dragons. The 6 junior sword hunters formed the Outer Hexagonal Sword Formation to block the attacks of the savage-clawed dragons. They did not aim to kill them, but to protect themselves. Sha Kuang, on the other hand, took the lives of the savage-clawed dragons one after another. Guyu kept staring at the stone nest in the middle. "Sir Guyu, is there something you haven't said?" The senior junior sword hunter, who had been observing Guyu's expression, suddenly asked. "There might be a mutated savage-clawed dragon inside." Guyu pondered for a moment and said, "But this is only my guess. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, so I can't be sure." Mutated savage-clawed dragon. Everyone's expression changed. Mutated savage beasts were also a type of savage beasts, but they were very rare. Mutated savage beasts, in addition to their original characteristics, would also gain other abilities and become even stronger. Therefore, mutated savage beasts were often stronger than normal savage beasts of the same level. "Sir Guyu, this should be very important news," the senior junior sword hunter said. The others' expressions were also a bit ugly. "Your mission is only to hold back the savage-clawed dragons outside. Even if there is a mutated savage-clawed dragon in the nest, leave it to us, the Bloody Light team, to deal with it," Guyu said calmly. At this moment, everyone caught a glimpse of a figure rushing out of the stone nest like lightning. In the blink of an eye, it collided with Sha Kuang. A violent and ear-piercing sound of metal clashing shook the air. The 2 figures, one big and one small, were both sent flying back. Mutated savage-clawed dragon. Sha Kuang held his sword in front of him with both hands. His pupils contracted, and he stared at the savage-clawed dragon that appeared 100 meters away. This savage-clawed dragon was 10 meters tall, which meant that it had reached the pinnacle of the earth-shattering level. Its body was different from normal savage-clawed dragons, as it was covered with palm-sized iron armor. The savage-clawed dragon had the terrifying speed and sharp claws of a savage-clawed dragon. At the same time, it also had the powerful iron armor of a savage-clawed dragon. Because of the iron armor, its bloodline had mutated, and its strength was even stronger than a savage-clawed dragon of the same level. This savage-clawed dragon at the pinnacle of the earth-shattering level was enough to fight against a normal savage-clawed dragon. It really is a mutated savage-clawed dragon. The senior junior sword hunter's pupils contracted. Chumu and the others were also very surprised. The savage iron-armored claw dragon watched from afar after its attack missed. It stared at Sha Kuang with its cold silver eyes and suddenly let out a short roar. Then, another figure rushed out from the stone nest and stopped beside the savage iron-armored claw dragon. When it revealed itself, everyone was shocked again. It was another savage claw dragon, and it was also 10 meters tall. This time, both Guyu and Sha Kuang could not keep calm anymore. If it was only one savage-clawed dragon at the pinnacle of the earth-shattering level, an intermediate sword hunter would be able to deal with it or even kill it. However, if there were 2 of them, the difficulty and danger would be doubled. "What's going on? How can there be two mutated savage-clawed dragons in a medium-sized tribe with only 300 savage-clawed dragons? While they were confused, another figure flashed and appeared beside the two savage-clawed dragons. The sword hunters' faces changed instantly, and their pupils contracted rapidly. It was another mutated savage-clawed dragon, and it was not a normal mutation, but a double-mutated savage-clawed dragon. It was 20 meters tall, and its body was covered in iron armor. Its body was emitting a violent aura, and its claws were longer and bigger than the other two. The tip of the claws shone with a cold and sharp light. When one's gaze fell on the claws, one's pupils would feel as if they were stabbed by needles, and would feel waves of pain. Savage-clawed dragon. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 574. Double mutation, possessing the characteristics of savage ankylosaurus, savage tyrannosaurus, and savage-clawed dragon. Terrifying defense, shocking strength, and terrifying speed. It could be said that this double-mutated savage-armored tyrannosaurus did not have any obvious weaknesses. It was 20 meters tall, and also at the peak of earth-shattering level, but it was much stronger than the other two mutated savage-clawed dragons. Sha Kuang's face became very ugly, and the 6 members of the Mad Kill Squad were also very shocked. On Gu Yu's side, the sword hunters' faces were also very ugly. They did not expect that there were 3 mutated savage-clawed dragons hidden in the stone nest, and one of them was so terrifying. Hypothetically speaking, if the Berserker squad had not shown up, even if they only needed to distract the mandrill-clawed dragons outside, they might still have to face the sharp claws of the 3 mutated mandrill-clawed dragons. Although there was a price to pay in order to gain something, and the price might be their lives, no one wanted to die if they could live. Gu Yu and the others still did not move, because they did not know if there were any more mutated savage-clawed dragons in the stone nest. The 3 mutated savage-clawed dragons were very powerful. When they attacked, they turned into 3 streaks of light and tore through the air, rushing towards Sha Kuang. Sha Kuang's face was very serious. He held his sword with both hands and used all his strength to block the attacks of the 3 mutated savage-clawed dragons. The other 6 members of the Mad Kill Squad also used all their strength, operating the hexagonal sword formation to resist the attack. After dozens of breaths, there were still no mutated savage-clawed dragons. Everyone, this time the Bloody Mang Squad, did not have enough information. For this reason, we are willing to pay each of you 1,000 hunting points after this is done. I hope that you will do your best and cooperate with us. Gu Yu said in a low voice. 1,000 hunting points was not a lot, but it was not a little either. At least, it showed Gu Yu's sincerity, and greatly dispelled the dissatisfaction in everyone's hearts. Let's move. Gu Yu took the lead, and the 3 members of the Bloody Mang Squad immediately followed. Chu Mu and the rest of the 12 hired junior sword hunters rushed towards the stone nest. At that moment, the 3 mutant Mandraconians and most of the Mandraconians were attacking the members of the Berserker squad. This created the perfect opportunity for Chu Mu and the others. The 16 swordsmen burst forth with extreme speed, turning into 16 afterimages as they rushed toward the stone nest. While Sha Kuang was blocking the attack of the mutated barbaric clawed dragon, he caught a glimpse of Chu Mu and the others from the corner of his eye. He was instantly enraged. He did not expect there to be someone else apart from the Berserker squad. They even took advantage of the moment when he was fighting the barbaric clawed dragon. Sha Kuang felt like he was about to explode, but the 3 mutated barbaric clawed dragons were too strong for him to escape. Swoosh, 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 swoosh sounds were heard as Gu Yu took the lead to rush into the stone nest, followed by his 3 team members. Chu Mu and the rest of the 12 primary sword hunters also rushed into the stone nest. The stone nest looked simple, but it was very sturdy and huge. After all, it was made for the 10 to 20 meter tall barbaric clawed dragons to live in. The moment they entered the stone nest, Chu-Mu and the others were immediately attracted to the center of the nest. It was a circle made of small stones, covered with flexible iron leaves. On the iron leaves there were eggs the size of a human head. Most of the eggs were white with traces of yellowish-brown claw marks. They were emitting a weak and sharp aura, indicating that they were the eggs of the barbaric clawed dragons. So many, more than 100 eggs. Although not every egg could be successfully hatched, at least half of the 100 eggs could be successfully hatched. After hatching, the number of barbaric clawed dragons in the tribe would obviously increase. Once these barbaric clawed dragons grew up, the strength of the entire tribe would increase again. Generation after generation, if there were no accidents, the tribe would only become stronger and stronger. Chu-Mu quickly glanced over and found that among the 100 eggs, there seemed to be 2 or 3 that were different in color from the other eggs. But before he could take a closer look, Guyu waved his hand and collected all the eggs into his space ring. This is the goal of our mission. After collecting all the eggs, Guyu said to Chu-Mu and the others, the value of more than 100 barbaric clawed dragon eggs was extraordinary. It was no wonder that Guyu was willing to pay so many hunting points to hire 12 primary sword hunters. Even if the hunting points were doubled, it was still worth it for Guyu. Although they were envious, since this was the mission, the hired sword hunters couldn't go back on their words and fight for these eggs unless Guyu and the others died. The eggs are in our hands, let's leave immediately. Guyu said, turned around and immediately rushed out of the stone nest. The others followed suit. Chu-Mu's eyes subconsciously swept over the iron leaves again. His eyes narrowed as he saw a fist-sized stone at the bottom. With a thought, he put the stone into his space ring. Then, everyone rushed out of the stone nest. Angry roars could be heard as the 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons gave up on attacking Sha Kuang and led the other earth-shattering barbaric clawed dragons towards the stone nest. Those eggs were the descendants of this tribe. They were usually guarded by the 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons. If it wasn't for Sha Kuang's strength, the 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons wouldn't have all come out in order to get rid of him as soon as possible. Now that more than 100 eggs were collected by Guyu, the 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons immediately sensed it. They gave up on attacking Sha Kuang in anger and let out terrifying roars, their killing intent soaring to the sky. Shit, the variant barbaric clawed dragons are chasing after us. Let's go. Guyu and the others' faces changed. The sword hunters burst out one by one, even Chu-Mu was no exception. However, the 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons were unbelievably fast. In the blink of an eye, they crossed several thousand meters and caught up. That kind of tyrannical and sharp aura poured down like a waterfall, bombarding everyone's body. Tremble! Tremble! Scram! Guyu roared and unsheathed his yang sword. It turned into a huge sword light like a mountain and blasted towards the 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons. Roar! The barbaric armored tyrant clawed dragon roared and clawed fiercely, instantly tearing the sword light apart. Its speed was not affected at all as it rushed forward. The 2 barbaric armored tyrant clawed dragons were like guards beside it. Damn it, so it's you guys. Sha Kuang also saw Guyu and the others. His face changed and his killing intent soared. Boom boom boom. The sword hunters all made their moves, performing their sword skills towards the 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons. Not to mention killing them, they only needed to block them and slow them down a little. Roar! 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 The 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons were enraged. Their sharp claws tore through space, allowing the sword skills to land on their bodies. They did not move at all, not even their iron armor could break through. The group of barbaric clawed dragons behind them also caught up. Each of them was incomparably furious, their eyes scarlet red. Rush into the stone forest and we will be safe. Guyu roared. If they rushed into the stone forest, they would have the giant rocks as cover. The barbaric clawed dragons were bigger in size, making it harder for them to move, making it easier for them to escape. Normally, this distance would be covered very quickly. But now, with the barbaric clawed dragons chasing after them, a few hundred meters felt like tens of thousands of meters long. Hurry! 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 Chu Mu unleashed his full speed, overtaking the beginner sword hunters one after another. He was now on par with the 3 elite beginner sword hunters. Gu Yu was an intermediate sword hunter and a complete Origin Realm warrior. In terms of speed, he was slightly faster than Chu Mu. With a swoosh, Gu Yu was the first to rush into the stone forest. In the next moment, Chu Mu and the other 3 members of the Bloody Ray team also rushed into the stone forest. The 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons also caught up. With a wave of their sharp claws, the terrifying claws tore through the air and tore the last beginner sword hunter into pieces. A Mountain Breaker realm mutated barbaric clawed dragon was not something a beginner sword hunter could handle. It was killed in an instant. The blood-curdling screams made the hearts of the sword hunters in front tighten. Under the threat of life and death, they increased their speed by a little bit. The variant barbaric clawed dragon caught up. With a wave of its sharp claws, another beginner sword hunter's body was torn apart and died tragically. No one dared to look back. Facing the horrifying variant barbaric clawed dragon, even Gu Yu, an intermediate sword hunter, did not dare to fight. Run! Run! 4 beginner sword hunters were torn into pieces by the sharp claws. The 3 variant barbaric clawed dragons rushed into the stone forest. Their huge bodies affected their agility and speed. Under anger, the variant barbaric clawed dragons waved their sharp claws and smashed the huge rocks into pieces. The steel-shattering barbaric clawed dragons that tried to stop them were killed with a single slash. Running for their lives, they used half an hour to enter the stone forest. But when they left, the time was shortened by 100 times. Swoosh! 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 Figures rushed out of the stone forest one after another. Let's go back to the Saint City first. Gu Yu shouted. The group did not slow down at all as they rushed towards the Saint City. Chu Mu realized that there were a few people missing. There were 16 of them when they entered, but now there were only 11 left. In other words, 5 beginner sword hunters had died under the claws of the barbaric clawed dragons. If he had been a little slower, he might have been one of them. No one felt good about losing 5 people at once. Therefore, no one said a word as they rushed forward. In the distance, the barbaric clawed dragon's furious roars could be heard. Because of the obstruction of the stone forest, the barbaric clawed dragon's speed was greatly reduced. In the end, Chu Mu and the rest escaped. After running for 4 hours, they could no longer hear the barbaric clawed dragon's roars. Only then did they slow down and adjust their breathing. They maintained a certain speed and continued to move forward. The most important thing now was to return to the Saint City. After completing the mission, they would think about everything else. What they did not know was that the members of the Berserker squad were not dead. Sha Kuang had also seen them clearly and remembered everyone's breathing. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 575. I'm very sorry for the deaths of the 5 of them. Within the Sword Hunter Mansion of the Holy City of the Wild, Gu Yu said to Chu Mu and the other 7 primary sword hunters that were still alive. From the moment we accepted the mission, we hung our heads on our waists. A primary sword hunter wryly smiled. In the eyes of others, they were adults, but in reality, they were just slightly stronger swordsmen. They would be afraid, they would panic, they would die, and they would constantly struggle to survive. No matter what, this time, our Blood Red Squad's goal was achieved. But there were some unforeseen circumstances, and we were almost completely wiped out. For this reason, I've decided to give each of you 9,000 hunting points. Gu Yu solemnly said. 9,000. Chu Mu and the others were suddenly shocked. According to the previous agreement, they should have received 4,000 hunting points after completing the mission, and then increased it by 1,000, which was 5,000. But now it had increased to 9,000. No one refused, because no one would dislike having more hunting points. Thus, Chu Mu's primary sword hunting token increased by 9,000 hunting points, reaching a total of 10,000. This meant that he could enter the Enlightenment Pagoda or the 10,000 killing array for 100 hours. 100 hours. With Chu Mu's perception, it was enough to significantly enhance the concept of void, and greatly increase his survivability. Everyone, I hope that we will have a chance to cooperate next time. Finally, Guyu said with a smile. Goodbye. The primary sword hunters saluted and left. Sir Chu Mu, please wait. As Chu Mu was about to leave, he was stopped by Guyu. Captain Guyu, what advice do you have for me? Chu Mu asked. Although it's a bit presumptuous, I'll be direct. I don't know if Sir Chu Mu plans to join any group? Guyu asked with a smile. Thank you for Captain Guyu's good intentions, but I don't have any plans to join any group. Chu Mu understood Guyu's meaning, and tactfully refused. If Sir Chu Mu has plans, then you can talk to me about it. Guyu said with a smile. All right, then I'll take my leave first. Chu Mu turned and left. Captain, he's just a beginner sword hunter, one of the team members said. He has a lot of potential. Guyu said, then shook his head and changed the topic. Let's go, we should get rid of these eggs. Chu Mu was not in a hurry to head to the Tao Enlightenment Pagoda. Instead, he returned to the house he had bought. Sitting on a chair, Chu Mu held a fist-sized stone in his hand. The entire stone was black in color, and there seemed to be little crystals scattered on it. When there was light, it would shine. Chu Mu felt that the stone was constantly emitting a strange fluctuation, but it was very subtle and he couldn't distinguish it. When he took the stone away, it was purely a subconscious action. He didn't know what it was. Perhaps it was a treasure, or perhaps it was just an ordinary stone. Could it be? Chu Mu's eyes lit up as if a bolt of lightning flashed through his mind. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It seems that I can only check the relevant books. If it is, it must be very precious. Chu Mu thought. If his guess was true, then the value of this stone might be above the 100+ savage-clawed dragon eggs. However, for a moment, Chu Mu didn't know where to go to read the relevant books. After resting for a while, Chu Mu left the house and headed to the Tao Enlightenment Pagoda. Stop! A low voice seemed to explode in his ears. Then, a figure flashed and surrounded Chu Mu. Chu Mu looked and saw that it was the Mad Killer Squad. However, it wasn't 7, but 5. He didn't know if not all of them had arrived or if 2 of them had died. At this time, the members of the Mad Killer Squad looked unfriendly, as if they wanted to tear apart Chu Mu's body. Especially Sha Kuang's face and eyes, which were incomparably gloomy and full of killing intent. That kind of eyes seemed to want to pierce through Chu Mu. You'd better stay in the city obediently. Once you leave the city and we find out you're dead. Sha Kuang growled word by word. His voice was like thunder rolling out from his throat and into Chu Mu's ears. I'll wait. Chu Mu's eyes were indifferent. He didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Good, very good, very good. Sha Kuang's gloomy face revealed a sneer. Those familiar with Sha Kuang knew that this was how he looked like when his anger reached its peak. Captain! The team members beside him suddenly became anxious. They were very familiar with Sha Kuang, so they knew that Sha Kuang was on the verge of exploding. If he didn't restrain himself, he would definitely explode and attack. At that time, regardless of whether he killed Sha Kuang or not, he would be hunted down by the Sacred Sword Guard. Unless he left the sacred city of the Wildlands forever and never set foot in it again, the price would be too great. Sha Kuang immediately sobered up after being shouted at by his team members. He glared at Chu Mu fiercely as if he wanted to brand Chu Mu. Then, he suddenly shook his head and said, "Let's go." He didn't dare to stay any longer. He was afraid that he would explode and attack again. The price would be too great. The other 4 members of the Berserker squad also glared at Chu Mu fiercely before turning around and leaving. Chu Mu retracted his gaze and walked towards the Enlightenment Pagoda as if nothing had happened. After paying 10 million upper-grade spiritual stones and 10,000 hunting points, Chu Mu entered the first level of the Enlightenment Pagoda and started comprehending the Wukong state. 100 hours meant more than 8 days. As for the upper-grade spiritual stones, apart from the primary realm swordsman he had killed, they were mainly from the ruins of the Sky Dragon Sword Saint. Of course, for Chu Mu, 10 million upper-grade spiritual stones wasn't a small amount. In the blink of an eye, more than 8 days had passed. For Chu Mu, who was in seclusion in the Enlightenment Pagoda to comprehend the Wukong state, it was like a short second. 70% of the void state. From 30% to minor completion, and then to the current Deshang, Chu Mu had gained a lot in these 200 hours. As a profound and special state, it was even better than a high-end mutated state like the laceration state. Therefore, 70% of the void state was actually better than 100% of the normal state. If there were a 120% state of the void state, then 70% of the void state would be equivalent to a 120% state of the normal state. However, the state of the void and the profound were 2 different levels of power. Therefore, no matter how powerful the void state was, it couldn't be compared to the profound. After all, they weren't on the same level. I still need more hunting points to comprehend the void state to the profound level. After leaving the Enlightenment Pagoda, Chu Mu planned to return to his house first. On the way, he met the captain of the Bloody Mang squad, Gu Yu. Captain Gu Yu. Sir Chu Mu. Seeing Chu Mu, Gu Yu seemed to be very happy, which puzzled Chu Mu. Sir Chu Mu, if I may ask, did the Berserker squad come to threaten you? Gu Yu asked. Yes. Chu Mu said. As expected. Gu Yu's face became very ugly. Sir Chu Mu, let's find a place to talk. All right. Chu Mu nodded. In the holy city of wilderness, there were inns and restaurants. Chu Mu and Gu Yu sat on the 3rd floor of a restaurant near the window. There were several dishes and wine on the table. The Berserker squad and the Bloody Mang squad have always been on bad terms. There have been several conflicts. Gu Yu drank a cup of wine and said, this time, after obtaining the Savage Clawed Dragon's egg, it caused a conflict between us. With Sha Kuang's personality, he will definitely find trouble with you. Chu Mu didn't answer. Other than you, Senior Chu Mu, the others have all been killed in these 8 days. Their heads have all been sent to me. Gu Yu's face became extremely gloomy, as if water was about to drip out of it. Chu Mu was shocked. They were all killed? And their heads were sent to Gu Yu? This method was really cruel. This was a provocation to Gu Yu and the Bloody Mang squad. At the same time, it was also a threat to Chu Mu. I thought that Sir Chu Mu wouldn't be able to escape from the enemy. Fortunately, Sir Chu Mu is safe and sound. Gu Yu said, I am very sorry about this. The hatred between the Berserker squad and my Bloody Mang squad has affected you. Captain Gu Yu, you don't need to feel guilty. Chu Mu said. Gu Yu issued a mission, and Chu Mu and the others accepted it. Both sides were willing to cooperate with each other. Sir Chu Mu, what do you plan to do next? Gu Yu didn't bother with this question. Same as before. Chu Mu said with a smile. Sir Chu Mu, why don't you join our Bloody Mang squad? We can take care of each other. Gu Yu said. Thank you for your kindness, Captain Gu Yu, but I am used to moving alone. Chu Mu tactfully refused again. That's a pity. Gu Yu shook his head and said, in that case, I won't force you. However, Sir Chu Mu must be careful. Don't run into the Berserker squad. Otherwise, your life will be in danger. I'm not that easy to kill. Chu Mu smiled and changed the topic. Oh right, Captain Gu Yu, may I ask how much you know about the mutation of the savage beasts? I don't know much. Although he was surprised by Chu Mu's question, Gu Yu still answered, I roughly know that the mutation of the savage beasts is caused by the mutation of their bloodline. As for why the mutation of their bloodline would occur, there are many possibilities. It could be due to the mating of different savage beasts, or it could be due to the influence of some treasure. I wonder if there is such a treasure in the savage-clawed dragon tribe? Chu Mu seemed to be talking to himself. There shouldn't be. If there was, there would definitely be a strange fluctuation, Gu Yu said. He didn't know that Chu Mu had taken away a strange stone. My understanding of this is still too little. Where can I find it? Chu Mu smiled. That's easy. I have it here. Gu Yu smiled and took out a silk book that was as thick as a finger and handed it to Chu Mu. This book records many treasures of the ancient savage desolation realm. I'll give it to you. I hope it will help you understand the ancient savage desolation realm. Then it would be impolite for me to refuse. Chu Mu smiled and received the book. After chatting for a while, the two of them left. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 576. Captain, that brat just met Gu Yu and stayed in a restaurant for half an hour. A member of the Berserk squad reported to Sha Kuang. Keep an eye on him. Sha Kuang's eyes were filled with killing intent as he bit into a large piece of meat in his hand, as if it was Chu Mu's meat. Once he leaves the holy city, inform me immediately. I want to use his head as a final gift to the Bloody Mang squad. Yes, Captain. Chu Mu returned to his room with the book Gu Yu gave him. The cover of this book was black, and there were a few words written in bold strokes, vigorous and forceful. Small collection of treasures of the ancient region. Flipping open the cover, Chu Mu found a table of contents. After a rough glance, he found that the table of contents only had 1,000 entries. There were definitely more than 1,000 types of treasures in the ancient region. However, this book only recorded 1,000 types of treasures. No wonder it was called a small collection. Chu Mu wasn't sure if the black stone he obtained from the Dragonclaw tribe was really a treasure. He also didn't know if it was in this small collection. Therefore, he could only start from the first page. After all, the book didn't have a detailed classification. He only saw the names of many things and didn't know what they looked like. With Chu Mu's reading ability, he only used half an hour to finish reading the book. Moreover, his powerful memory allowed him to remember the contents of the book as if they were branded in his mind. Putting away the book, Chu Mu closed his eyes and recalled the contents of the book. There were records of thousands of treasures, such as spiritual herbs and ores. He found that he didn't seem to see any records of the black stone. Could it be that it wasn't recorded? Thinking of this, Chu Mu took out the black stone and carefully observed it. He even released his mental energy and tried to penetrate it. At first, he couldn't do anything. However, after several attempts, Chu Mu's mental energy finally penetrated a bit. This is... Chu Mu's face showed a shocked expression. Retracting his mental energy, he gathered the sword energy on his finger and grabbed it. With a cracking sound, cracks appeared on the stone. Chu Mu forcefully pulled it off and saw a completely different color. It was transparent like a crystal, and there were specks of starlight moving slowly inside, like the stars in the night sky. Could it be? Chu Mu's eyes lit up. He waved his hands in the air and broke off the black stones, revealing an oval-shaped crystal about the size of an egg. It was like a flawless crystal with specks of starlight inside. It was deep and mysterious, full of mysteries, like a miniature version of the starry night sky. Holding this crystal, Chu Mu could clearly feel the strange energy ripples emanating from it. The energy ripples were constantly being emitted and disappeared into the surrounding space. Carefully looking at the crystal, the specks of starlight within it seemed to have turned into a night sky, causing one to almost be intoxicated. Fortunately, Chu Mu's soul was strong enough to wake up and escape. Heavenly Star Crystal. It is indeed such a treasure. Chu Mu sighed, revealing a heartfelt smile. The Heavenly Star Crystal was recorded in the small collection book. It was one of the top 10 treasures among the thousands of treasures and was very precious. The heavenly star crystal had only one function, and that was to release radiation to change the bloodline of savage beasts or demonic beasts. This change was to make them better, stronger, and more perfect. Regardless of whether it was demonic beasts or savage beasts, the heavenly star crystal had an unparalleled allure. It was a rare treasure that could allow their life to evolve. Although the heavenly star crystal was useless to humans, there were some human swordsmen who reared demonic beasts or savage beasts. When these demonic beasts or savage beasts grew up, they would become excellent helpers. If one could obtain the heavenly star crystal and mutate the bloodline of the demonic beasts or savage beasts, they would become even stronger and be of greater help to the swordsman. Sell it. Chumu thought about how to deal with this heavenly star crystal. Or should I tame a savage beast and use the heavenly star crystal to mutate the savage beast's bloodline? Keep it first. Using the infinite baron's sword vitality and sword intent, he set up a simple seal on the surface of the heavenly star crystal, preventing its power from radiating out. As the heavenly star crystal was a consumable, as its power continued to radiate from within, the heavenly star crystal would become smaller and smaller until it eventually disappeared. Therefore, before it was used, he would seal it first to prevent it from leaking out. Let's go to the swordsman mansion to take a look at the mission first. Chumu's goal was to see if there were any suitable special missions to do. After all, special missions earned more hunting points than regular missions. Unfortunately, he could not find a suitable special mission. Chumu sold the inner cores of the steel-shattering savage beasts in his spatial ring to the swordsman mansion in exchange for some high-grade spirit stones to replenish his consumption. After that, he left the swordsman mansion and headed out of the Holy Wildlands City. Not long after Chumu left the Holy Wildlands City, the Berserker squad also left the city to check on his track. He runs pretty fast. Sha Kuang's face was ferocious. Chase. Immediately, the 5 members of the Berserker squad burst forth with speed and chased in the direction Chumu left. Chumu's speed was very fast, almost at full strength. Moreover, his endurance was very shocking. Therefore, after an hour, the Berserker squad could only stare blankly at Chumu's back as it got further and further away from them until it could no longer be seen. Damn bastard! The Berserker squad was furious. Sha Kuang's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The difference between a completion Astral Realm warrior and 4 profound Astral Realm swordsmen was less than a quarter of an hour, yet they couldn't even catch up to a lesser Astral Realm swordsman. If word got out, the Mad Killing Squad would lose all face. Chase. We must catch up to him no matter what. The Berserker squad was determined to catch up to Chumu. No matter what, they had to catch up to him. One must know that when they were chasing after the other junior sword hunters, they had caught up to them in less than 30 minutes and killed them instantly. It was a clean job. Those junior sword hunters were all at the Origin Realm Deshang swordsman level. For Chumu to become a junior sword hunter despite being at the minor achievement Astral Realm and having a duel with Yang Lianfeng of the Jade Sword Gang, it was enough to show that Chumu's talent was shocking. Sha Kuang did not care about the duel. All in all, he had to kill Chumu. With a slight sound of wind breaking, Chumu's figure was like a cloud of dust. It was as if he had lost all his weight as he lightly flew across the ground. His speed was increasing bit by bit. This was something that was almost impossible. Originally, Chumu's speed was already faster than an ordinary complete Astral Realm swordsman. But now it was still increasing. It was unbelievable. What an unbelievable state! Chumu's face was filled with amazement. He tried to apply the state of emptiness to the Flying Goose illusory step. At first, it was very difficult because the Flying Goose illusory steps contained the profound of illusion and reality. The state of mind and the profound were completely different. The two powers could not be combined. Therefore, Chu could only use the state of emptiness to replace the profound of illusion and reality. After a short period of hard work, he successfully replaced the profound of illusion with the state of emptiness. Chu then realized that the flying goose illusory steps had undergone a magical change. In terms of power, 70% state of emptiness was not as good as 30% state of the profound of illusion. But for some reason, the state of emptiness was more suitable for the flying goose illusory steps than the profound of illusion. Chu only felt an indistinct connection between his body and the space around him. This connection caused the spatial restriction he felt to continuously decrease. It was as if an eagle was soaring in the sky, or a fish was swimming in the water. It was as if the flying goose illusory steps was born for the state of emptiness. Between the two there was 100% harmony. Chu-Mu's figure was like a wisp of smoke. In the blink of an eye, he had crossed hundreds of thousands of meters. The sound of the wind was barely audible. After Chu-Mu had integrated 70% state of emptiness into the flying goose illusory steps, his speed had reached its current limit. He had shaken off the mad killer team that was chasing after him. Compared to the flying swan illusory steps of the void concept, the flying swan illusory steps of the void concept is much faster and the user's body is also much lighter. However, its effect on the user's vision is much weaker. The state of emptiness and the profound of illusion and reality were two different powers with their own characteristic. When the two powers were used alternately in the flying goose illusory steps, there would be different results. Especially in battle, it would definitely be more flexible. Since he had shaken off the mad killer team, Chu-Mu began to alternately use the two powers to drive the flying goose illusory step. In the beginning, it wasn't very flexible, but Chu-Mu's comprehension was shocking. His soul power was powerful, and his mental power was far superior to others. His control over his body was much more precise. After a few tries, he began to grasp it. Sometimes it was like he was moving, but sometimes he wasn't. It looked like he was still in the same place, but in reality, he was already hundreds of meters away. Sometimes it was like he had lost all his weight and was 3 inches above the ground. It was almost as if he was flying. Because of the special rules of the ancient wilderness, the true realm swordsmen who came here couldn't fly. Only those who had reached the God condensation realm could resist the restrictions of the rules to a certain extent and regain the ability to fly. But today, Chu-Mu had done something that other true realm swordsmen couldn't, even though he was only 3 inches above the ground. Maybe after the state of emptiness breaks through to the profound of emptiness, I will be able to fly again. At that time, it will be more convenient for me to travel or escape. With this thought in mind, Chu-Mu went deeper into the ancient wilderness. This time, he planned to spend 2 to 3 months hunting the earth-shattering giant barbaric beasts to obtain more hunting points and try his best to stay in the Enlightenment Pagoda for as long as possible. It would be best if he could raise the state of emptiness to the profound of emptiness level, and then raise the level of his sword intent and other profounds as much as possible. Actually, Chu-Mu didn't really care about the half-year battle with Yang Lianfeng. In his opinion, it was only a small obstacle on his path. All his efforts were for him to go further on the path of the sword, and not just for Yang Lianfeng. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 577. With a swing of the sword, the space within a meter radius was immediately affected, becoming distorted and flowing like water. A huge head flew high into the air. Red blood with specks of yellow sprayed out like a fountain, making poochie sounds. 1 meter sword art field. Rank 1 sword art field. This meant that Chu-Mu had truly reached the entry level of the sword art field. Just like the sword art forbidden zone, the sword art field was also divided into 10 levels, with each level increasing by 1 meter. After using the sword art forbidden zone, within a certain range, One would be able to block attacks that did not exceed one's power by too much, regardless of speed. The sword art field went one step further. Not only did it have the power of the sword art forbidden zone, it could also affect the surrounding space, weakening the opponent's strength to a certain extent. Rumbling sounds continued to be heard as more and more savage beasts were chasing after Chu Mu. These savage beasts were even smaller than the savage clawed dragons. Even if they were at the peak of the earth-shattering realm, they were only 5 meters tall. They had a single horn on their forehead, and their hind limbs were abnormally developed. Their forelimbs did not have much power, and their tails were long and thin. Their running speed was shocking, even faster than the savage clawed dragons of the same realm. Savage horned velociraptor. Compared to the savage clawed dragons, the savage horned velociraptor's attacking power was slightly inferior. However, it was more frightening because the savage horned velociraptor was a true pack of savage beasts. Every time they appeared, there would be no less than 100 of them. Chu Mu used the flying swan illusory steps, and his body was like a wisp of smoke as he rapidly floated forward. Hundreds of savage horned velociraptor followed closely behind him. The steel-shattering level savage horned velociraptor was only slightly slower than the earth-shattering level savage clawed dragons. However, the earth-shattering level savage horned velociraptor's speed was obviously faster than the earth-shattering level savage clawed dragons. They could easily leave an ordinary astral realm sword artist in the dust. In terms of attacking power, Chu Mu had reached the level of a beginner-level sword hunter. In terms of speed, Chu Mu was faster than an ordinary intermediate-level sword hunter. However, he was still caught up by the dozens of earth-shattering level savage horned velociraptor. Holding the sword with both hands, every time a savage horned velociraptor charged at him, Chu Mu would use his sword field to block and cut off the head of the savage horned velociraptor. Run, run, run. After being chased for more than 4 hours, even with Chu Mu's strong endurance, he was unable to endure this kind of extreme speed. Chu Mu suddenly discovered a small cave in front of him. It was extremely hidden and difficult to discover because rocks formed a natural barrier. The entrance of the cave was behind a few rocks. It twisted and turned into the cave. It wasn't big and could only allow a human to enter from this height. He quickly released his mental strength and entered the cave. He didn't discover any danger. Without any hesitation, he charged into the cave. The savage one-horned velociraptors that were chasing after him all stopped at the entrance of the cave. Unable to enter, they could only let out angry roars and paced back and forth. The savage horned velociraptor was a savage behemoth that held grudges. Hundreds of savage horned velociraptors were pacing back and forth outside the cave, constantly letting out roars that were enough to strike fear into one's heart. After entering the cave, Chu Mu immediately felt that he was isolated from the outside world. The light in the cave was very dim, as if it would affect the space. Even with Chu Mu's perfect vision sword, he could not see clearly. He could only see the scene within a few meters. Although his spiritual force did not find anything unusual, Chu Mu did not dare to let down his guard. There were all sorts of strange things in this world. Perhaps there were some strange creatures that could avoid the perception of spiritual force. Holding the sword with both hands, Chu Mu carefully walked forward. The muscles on his arms fluctuated between relaxation and tension. This was Chu Mu's own technique. It allowed him to instantly explode in the face of a sudden attack and make the best response. Chu Mu's footsteps were very light. He had integrated 70% of the concept of emptiness into them. His entire body was light as a feather. Every step he took did not make any sound, like a ghost. As he walked, Chu Mu stopped. An indistinct sound came intermittently from afar, as if it came from nothingness. Listening carefully, Chu Mu heard a dripping sound. It was the sound of water dripping. It was very clear, but strangely there was also a kind of dull feeling like the beating of a drum. After distinguishing, Chu Mu immediately knew that it was the sound of a very viscous liquid dripping. It should be known that the sound of water dripping was slightly different from the sound of mercury dripping. What could it be? Chu Mu wondered to himself. He once again walked in the direction of the sound. After walking another kilometer or so, Chu Mu saw a fluorescent light in front of him. The fluorescent light on the ground was a small spring-like thing. The fluorescent light in the air was an upside-down stalagmite that was a few meters long. It was as white as the bright moon. A strange fragrance wafted out from the fluorescent light, causing Chu Mu's nose to twitch a few times. As far as he could see, he just happened to see a drop of yellowish-white liquid dripping from the tip of the stalagmite. When it landed on the spring below, it created an undetectable ripple. Could it be? Chu Mu immediately revealed a face of pleasant surprise. He recalled the thousands of treasures recorded in the small collection. Among them, there was one that was even more valuable than the stellar heavenly crystal. 100-year-old or 1,000-year-old. Chu Mu muttered to himself. The difference between 100-year-old and 1,000-year-old was more than 10 times. Its value was also more than 10 times. If 100-year-old was not inferior to the stellar heavenly crystal, then 1,000-year-old was far more valuable. It was enough to rank in the top 3 of the thousands of treasures in the small collection. Its value was immeasurable. He took another step forward, wanting to approach the treasure in front of him. Before his foot landed, Chu Mu suddenly felt a fatal danger. Without hesitation, he instinctively moved to the side. At the same time, he brandished his 2 swords and unleashed a 1-meter sword domain. There was a slight sound of something breaking through the air. Chu Mu only felt that something had collided with the 8-sided desolate sky sword. The powerful shock caused his hand to hurt, and the sword almost flew out of his hand. He did not see anything. When Chu Mu heard the sound of something breaking through the air again, he hurriedly brandished his sword and blocked it again. He used his footwork and integrated the profound meaning of illusion. His figure became erratic, and it was difficult to distinguish between real and fake. Chu Mu strengthened the release of his mental power and swept it across. He still did not find anything. He could only narrow his eyes and try his best to see everything around him. Vaguely, Chu Mu saw a flash of cold light in the darkness. His figure quickly dodged, only to feel that his protective sword aura was instantly torn apart. Fortunately, he dodged in time. Otherwise, his body would have been torn apart from the middle. Since his eyes were not of much use, Chu Mu simply closed his eyes and concentrated on his ears. Sword listening. In terms of the ranking of a swordsman's ability, sword listening was 1 level higher than sword seeing. Chu Mu's sword listening had also reached the level of perfection. There was a slight sound of something breaking through the air again. After closing his eyes, the power of sword listening was even stronger. The 2 swords swung in a simple arc, breaking apart the attack in the darkness. Chu Mu vaguely determined the direction of the attack. With a sword, the dark golden waning moon broke through the air and temporarily dispelled the darkness. With a pop, the dark golden waning moon shattered. The attack approached him again. This time, the sound was so soft that it was almost undetectable. Even Chu Mu's perfect sword listening had become difficult. With full concentration and abandoning all distracting thoughts, Chu Mu's mind was 1000% focused. He carefully sensed the fluctuations around him. He did not hold back at all in his near-perfect sword touching. With unprecedented mental concentration, Chu Mu felt as if his mental intent had been shattered into countless dust particles, adhering to every part of his body, every pore and every strand of hair. This caused every pore and strand of hair to feel as if they were instantly bestowed with life, and he could clearly feel all the minute fluctuations in the air. At this moment, the sword touching that he had been unable to break through for a long time was finally promoted to perfection. Perfect sword touching was even more profound than perfect sword listening. Under perfect sword touching, Any fluctuations that approached him would not be able to escape Chu Mu's perception, even if they could not be seen with his eyes or heard with his ears. An attack appeared in the darkness again. This time, Chu Mu dodged with unusual agility. Perfect sword touching allowed him to simulate the thing that attacked him in his spiritual world. It was the end of a tail. The tail was not thick, but it was very long, and the end was extremely sharp. The cold light made one's heart tremble. One could imagine that if one was stabbed by such a tail, a bloody hole would definitely be pierced. If it was before, Chu Mu would have had a hard time blocking it. However, now that he had closed his eyes and isolated his hearing, he could clearly sense it with perfect sword touching and make the best dodge. Chu Mu's body swayed. His steps seemed to be scattered as if he was drunk. Moon slashing. Bipolar. The dark golden waning moon and the purple light shot forward. The waning moon was shattered again, and bipolar seemed to be swallowed by darkness. Following that, Chu Mu once again felt the extremely sharp tail that seemed to be able to pierce through the void approaching silently. He swung his sword. Armor breaking. The combination of the mountain quaking force and the mountain piercing force once again slashed at the attacking tail. Originally, the sharpness of the eight-sided heavenly desolate sword was not enough to break the tail because the tail was too tough. However, by using armor breaking, the mountain quaking force was blasted into the tail, and the tail was immediately injured. At the same time, Chu Mu heard a strange roar. It sounded like the hiss of a snake, but also like the roar of a wild beast. The tail was injured and immediately retracted. There was no movement at all. The air was still, and Chu Mu was unable to sense it. Although perfect sword touching was very strong, it still had its limit. If the opponent was completely still, it would not cause the slightest fluctuation in the air, and Chu Mu would not be able to sense it. Especially in the darkness where he did not know where the target was hiding, and his spiritual power could not find it. Chu Mu stopped in his tracks. He held his sword with both hands and stood in place with his eyes closed. This was a competition of endurance. When one did not know where the target was, the best way was to wait with full concentration. This was because acting without authorization would give the target an opportunity to take advantage of. Chu Mu was not in a hurry at all. Taking advantage of this time, he was completely immersed in perfect sword touching, carefully feeling the changes brought about by perfect sword touching. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 578. The dripping sound was particularly clear in this dark cavern. This was not the sound of a treasure dripping, but the sound of blood dripping. At Chu Mu's feet was a corpse. Chu Mu's breathing gradually calmed down. After nearly an hour, the tail in the darkness launched another attack. Chu Mu seized this opportunity to directly use the heaven-bearing secret sword, using dual polarity, and heavily injuring the owner of the tail with tenfold power. Then, he found the target and used dual polarity once more. Using the heaven-bearing secret sword, twice made Chu Mu feel very tired. There was a feeling of weakness that came from within his body. If it were not for his strong will, he would have already collapsed. After a quarter of an hour of rest and recovery, he felt a little better. The light was too dim, and even the radiant bead could not be used here. Chu Mu could only see the general outline of the corpse. It was quite strange. With a thought, he put the corpse into his spatial ring. Then, he discovered that there was an oval egg the size of a soccer ball under the corpse. The egg of a giant wild beast? Although he didn't know what wild beast's egg it was, Chu Mu still put it away. After confirming that there were no other dangers, Chu Mu strode towards the glowing treasure. Bursts of strange fragrance constantly entered his nostrils. As he approached, Chu Mu felt that the sky wasteland sword essence was uncontrollably moving on its own. It seemed to be very active. As he approached, the faint white fluorescent light shone on Chu Mu's face. His eyes were filled with surprise. Although he had already guessed it, Seeing it with his own eyes still filled his heart with surprise. It surged through his body, and even his blood was about to boil. It really is wild milk. Chu Mu's voice was trembling because of joy. In front of him, there was only 1 square meter in size. Inside was wild milk. Every 15 minutes or so, there would be drops of yellow and white viscous liquid falling down. It looked very pure and gave off a feeling of perfection. At such a close distance, Chu Mu could clearly smell the rich and unique fragrance. There was the smell of milk and also the smell of savagery. The combination of these two together formed a unique and intoxicating smell. Chu Mu used his sword origin to wrap up an extremely small strand and placed it in his mouth before swallowing it. Immediately, an incomparably pure energy spread throughout his body and was automatically absorbed by his extremely exhausted body. That feeling of exhaustion that had seeped into his bones was immediately eliminated by a large margin. It should be the 1,000-year-old desolate milk. Chu Mu became even more excited. He took out another drop of millennium stalactite and swallowed it. The fatigue in his body gradually disappeared, and he regained his vitality. As for the fatigue in his mind, it would take time to recover. 1,000-year-old desolate milk had an extraordinary value. It was common knowledge that in some places with special geographical locations, dense spiritual energy would constantly gather. After a long period of evolution, it would form a liquid. Then, after a long period of precipitation, the energy within would accumulate and eventually form spirit milk. The minimum age of the spiritual milk was 100 years, because only by reaching this age would it form the spiritual milk. Spirit milk was a treasure formed by a large amount of spiritual energy. Similarly, desolate milk was a treasure formed by a large amount of desolate chi. In a place like the ancient savage realm, spiritual energy was very thin, while desolate chi was very dense. Almost all swordsmen needed spiritual energy for their cultivation. Desolate chi was not important to them, but desolate chi was a very good energy for tempering one's body. There were also some swordsmen who would absorb desolate chi to temper their bodies, allowing them to have stronger physical strength and so on. To many swordsmen, the desolate milk might not be of any use to them, but it still couldn't hide the value of the desolate milk. Chu Mu being able to find this desolate milk was entirely due to his luck. If he wasn't being chased by a group of savage horned velociraptors, he probably wouldn't have run to such a remote place. He also wouldn't have found the inconspicuous cave entrance that he could have missed by accident. If he didn't enter the cave, he wouldn't have found this small pool of millennium stalactite. Although the process was dangerous and he had to pay a certain price to use the Burying Heaven secret sword twice, the rewards were 100 times more. No one would refuse such a thing. Chu Mu quickly took out a large number of porcelain bottles from his interspatial ring. There were big and small bottles, and he opened them one by one and started to fill the pool with the millennium stalactite. After a while, Chu Mu finally finished filling the pool with the millennium stalactite. He also finished the porcelain bottles that he brought along. There were a total of 10 large porcelain bottles, and each bottle contained 2 caddies of millennium stalactite. There were also 20 bottles that could hold half a caddy of millennium stalactite. Finally, there were 60 bottles that could hold 2 to 2,000 years of millennium stalactite. In total, there were 42 caddies of millennium stalactite. The density of millennium stalactite was many times higher than water. Therefore, 1 to 2,000 years of millennium stalactite was only a fraction of 1 caddy of water. Looking at the smooth bottom of the pool and the stalagmites above, Chu Mu knew that it would take many years for this pool to be filled with millennium stalactite. At the very least, it would take a few hundred years. He didn't destroy the source of the millennium stalactite. That would be a reckless waste of God's gift. If he left it here, maybe in a few decades or even a few centuries, someone lucky would find this place and obtain the millennium stalactite. Maybe a few hundred years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, someone came here earlier than Chu Mu and obtained the Millennium Stalactite. That person also had the same thoughts as Chu Mu to leave a chance for the future generations. Another drop of Millennium Stalactite dripped down. Because of the lack of Millennium Stalactite at the bottom, it directly dripped onto the smooth bottom of the pool and splashed, settling down at the bottom again. This was a new beginning. Chu Mu sat cross-legged at the side. Unknowingly, he entered the ethereal realm. His mental exhaustion quickly disappeared and his mental strength recovered rapidly. Unknowingly, Chu Mu suddenly woke up as if he had just woken up from a dream. He only felt that the mental exhaustion had completely disappeared and his mental strength had recovered completely. His essence, qi, and spirit had once again reached their peak state. Feeling refreshed, Chu Mu moved his arms and legs a few times. In this dark cave, he started practicing the basic sword principles. Now that his swordsmanship had reached the level of the sword principle domain, practicing the basic sword principles again gave him a new feeling. Every sword strike seemed so simple, but every sword strike carried a strange and inexplicable power. It could affect the space within a 1-meter radius of the sword blade, causing the space within this small area to seem as if it was being washed by water, or as if it was being rotated against the wind, restraining, pulling, and other strange powers working together. The sword light was obscure and hard to see with the naked eye. After practicing the basic sword principles for a few rounds, Chu Mu exhaled a long breath. He sat cross-legged again and took out a small porcelain bottle. It contained 2 ounces of Millennium Stalactite. Opening the bottle, Chu Mu poured 2 ounces into his mouth. With a gulp, his throat moved and he swallowed 1 or 2,000 years of Millennium Stalactite. Suddenly, Chu Mu felt a pure and majestic energy rolling out in his stomach. The Sky Baron's sword essence, which had never stopped, suddenly increased in speed. It absorbed the energy of the Millennium Stalactite and unknowingly became more majestic and condensed. About an hour later, Chu Mu left his cultivation state because the 1 to 2,000 year desolate stone milk's energy had all been absorbed by him. The Sky Baron's sword essence has obviously improved and is not far from the peak. Chu Mu checked carefully and a smile appeared on his face. He then drank the remaining Millennium Stalactite in the porcelain bottle. Afterwards, he entered the state of cultivation again and absorbed the majestic and pure energy of the Millennium Stalactite. It was indeed the essence of the desolate qi. The pure desolate qi contained in 1 ounces was 10 times better than the middle desolate stones. With Chu Mu's current cultivation, he would need to absorb at least 100 middle desolate stones in order to increase his sword essence from the initial stage to the peak of the initial stage. Moreover, in terms of purity, the Millennium Stalactite was much better than the middle desolate stones. In other words, the increase in Chu Mu's cultivation from 1 to 2,000 year desolate stone milk was equivalent to 100 or 200 middle rank heavenly desolate stones. However, refining 1 or 2,000 year old desolation stone milk would only take an hour, while refining 100 middle grade desolation stones would take at least a year. Under the condition that his foundation was not affected, it would be better for him to increase his cultivation as soon as possible. Under this calculation, the value of the Millennium Stalactite was much higher than the desolate stones. After another hour, the sword essence on Chu Mu's body became stronger again. It had reached a limit, a critical point. Peak of the initial stage of the initial stage. Coming out of cultivation, Chu Mu was overjoyed as he felt the desolate sword essences increase in strength. Without the Millennium Stalactite, it would take at least a year to increase his cultivation from the initial stage to the peak of the initial stage. Even if there were some special circumstances, it would still take at least half a year. Now, Chu Mu had saved half a year or even a year's worth of time. If not for the fact that he had not made a breakthrough in his mental state, Chu Mu would have been able to reach the Deshang stage. However, reaching the peak of the initial stage had increased Chu Mu's overall strength. As long as my mental state can keep up, I will be able to consume the Millennium Stalactite the moment I reach the initial stage of the Deshang stage. Then, I will have the cultivation of the peak of the Deshang stage. Chu Mu muttered to himself. In this way, he would be able to save a lot of time for cultivation, which he could use in other areas. For example, comprehending sword intent or profound, or creating sword skills, etc. Next, I will make a breakthrough in my mental state and reach the peak of the initial stage of the Deshang stage. Then, I will finish the battle with Yang Lianfeng. After that, I will head to the Wanyuan Palace. Chu Mu had a clear understanding of his own path. He was determined to follow his own path. Now that he had obtained the Millennium Stalactite and reached the peak of the initial stage, Chu Mu left the cave. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 579. The sky was vast and the earth was boundless. A figure lightly floated 3 inches above the ground, flying through the air. Compared to 4 months ago, Chu Mu was much more proficient in using the concept of void. Even though he was still at 70%, the speed of the flying swan illusory step had increased by 20%. Chu Mu had gone deep into the ancient wild realm to hunt and kill savage beasts. In these 4 months, his harvest was great. He believed that when he returned, he would be able to exchange for a lot of hunting points. It would be enough for him to cultivate in the Enlightenment Pagoda or the 10,000 killing array for a long time. In these 4 months, Chu Mu's cultivation was still at the peak of the small success of the Origin realm. He constantly stabilized and purified the sky desolate sword essence. Compared to 4 months ago, it was much purer. Returning from a rewarding journey, Chu Mu was in a very good mood. As he looked around, Chu Mu's pupils suddenly shrank. This was because he saw the 5 members of the Frenzy Squad fighting with several earth-splitting level savage beasts. With Sha Kuang, an intermediate sword hunter, killing these earth-shattering giant savage beasts wasn't too difficult. However, perhaps because Sha Kuang wanted to train the 4 members' teamwork, he didn't make a move. He only watched from the side as the 4 members worked together to deal with the 3 earth-shattering giant savage beasts. Frenzy Squad. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a fierce light. He fully displayed the concept of void with the flying swan illusory step. He was almost silent. With the help of the 3 earth-splitting level savage beasts, he quietly approached the Frenzy Squad. Sha Kuang was on the side, observing the surrounding movements. It was just that Chu Mu wasn't close enough. In addition, he had used the hidden edge technique and used the concept of void to the extreme. Unless Sha Kuang had also comprehended the concept of void and was above Chu Mu, he wouldn't be able to distinguish the unique fluctuations of the concept of void. Lowering his speed, Chu Mu simulated everything in front of him in his mind. How could he wipe out the Frenzy Squad in one fell swoop? Sha Kuang is the strongest. The other 4 are nothing to worry about. Chu Mu thought to himself. Now, with Chu Mu's strength, dealing with the 4 elementary sword hunters wasn't too stressful. However, if the 4 elementary sword hunters joined forces and formed a sword formation, it would become difficult to deal with them. However, Chu Mu would launch a thunderous attack and kill them in one fell swoop. On the other hand, Sha Kuang possessed the strength of an intermediate sword hunter, making him difficult to deal with. Hence, Shi Feng had to kill him in one hit to prevent Sha Kuang from retaliating. Blood Fiend Puppet, it's time for you to be put to use. Ever since he had obtained the Blood Fiend Puppet, Chu Mu hadn't used it because the Blood Fiend Puppet was only equivalent to a normal sword sovereign rank sword practitioner. In other words, it was equivalent to a beginner sword hunter. It wasn't very useful. But now, it came in handy. All kinds of possibilities were simulated in his mind. Chu Mu looked for the best time and trajectory to strike. In an instant, the baleful blood puppet was released, and all of its power erupted. It turned into a meteor and rushed towards the 4 junior sword hunters. The 4 junior sword hunters of the Berserker squad were fighting against the 3 earth-shattering barbaric behemoths. They were being restrained by the 3 barbaric behemoths. The sudden appearance of the baleful blood puppet and the eruption of power immediately alarmed Sha Kuang. Who? With a thunderous roar, Sha Kuang's eyes emitted an astonishing light, like sword light piercing through the void. At the same time, the sword in his hand was unsheathed. The thick and pure sword essence surged like the water of a great river. The surrounding air was pushed aside, forming a terrifying vacuum zone in an instant. Kill. Chu Mu instantly unleashed the heaven-burying secret sword. A terrifying killing intent gushed out like the magma of a 1,000-year-old volcano, shattering the sky. The 8 desolate sky swords were unsheathed. The profound of water and profound of fire poured into the swords, rotating and condensing. As the desolate sky sword essence surged, a purple aurora suddenly shot out from the tip of the sword. It pierced through the sky and shot toward Sha Kuang. The space of several hundred meters seemed to be in vain. The sword had already shot to the side of Sha Kuang's head in an instant. Sha Kuang had just pulled out his sword and was about to use a powerful sword skill to kill the baleful blood puppet. The protective sword aura was instantly destroyed by the purple aurora as if it was nothing. In less than 1,000th of a second, Sha Kuang's head was pierced by bipolar from the side and exited from the other side of his temple. Sha Kuang's eyes bulged. They were about to fall out. He couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that he was killed just like that. Then, his vision turned black. It was as if the sky had turned from day to night and then to night. Everything was disappearing. Even his consciousness was sinking into a bottomless abyss. His eyes lost their light and became dim. He slowly fell backward. This change was extremely fast. In less than the blink of an eye, Sha Kuang had died under Chu Mu's sword. The baleful blood puppet was still attacking the other 4 junior sword hunters of the Berserker squad. The 4 junior sword hunters of the Berserker squad also saw Sha Kuang's death. For a moment they were stunned. "Captain!" After a breath, a sorrowful cry sounded. The operation of the sword formation slowed down. The 3 earth-shattering barbaric beasts launched powerful attacks and immediately injured 3 junior sword hunters. Die! Resisting the mental and physical exhaustion, Chu Mu's expression was cold. His tone was indifferent. He used the flying swan illusory steps and rushed toward the 4 junior sword hunters. With a slash of his sword, a dark golden crescent moon broke through the sky. Once again, the purple aurora pierced through the void. The 2 sword skills immediately killed one of the injured junior sword hunters. Chu Mu used the inverted space step and appeared behind the uninjured junior sword hunter. He then slashed horizontally. Sword skill cut iron. Cut in half at the waist. The baleful blood puppet attacked another injured junior sword hunter. Meanwhile, Chu Mu used the inverted space step again and appeared beside the 4th junior sword hunter. Once again, he killed the 4th junior sword hunter. In a flash, in just 3 breaths of time, Sha Kuang was killed first. Then, the 4 junior sword hunters were killed one by one. The 3 earth-shattering barbaric beasts lost their targets and immediately attacked the baleful blood puppet and Chu Mu. The baleful blood puppet went to block the 3 beasts but was instantly sent flying. Chu Mu seized the opportunity and used the inverted space step to appear on the side. It just so happened that the 3 earth-shattering barbaric beasts were side by side. Heaven-burying secret sword skill, dual polarity. The purple aurora that was 10 times stronger pierced through the void. In an instant, it pierced through the tough outer skin of the first earth-shattering wild behemoth's head. Pierced through and shot into the second beast, pierced through again and shot into the third beast. The barbaric beasts' bodies were huge and their skin was tough. The bipolar aurora that was 10 times stronger only pierced through the third beast's body. It didn't pierce through, but in the end it exploded and the sword energy minced the barbaric beast's brains. The 3 barbaric beasts all fell in the same direction. Their huge bodies slammed into the ground, causing the earth to tremble and rumble as if there was an earthquake. Chu-Mu quickly took out a small porcelain bottle and poured out 2 drops of thousand-year desolation stone milk into his stomach. After it dissolved, it quickly nourished his body, quickly dispelling the deep and bone-deep fatigue in his body. 15 minutes later, Chu-Mu felt that the exhaustion in his body had basically disappeared. However, the mental exhaustion was still there. It made him feel dizzy and had a splitting headache. It was as if he had been cleaved in half by an axe. It was very uncomfortable. Chu-Mu forcefully endured this sadness and glanced at the baleful blood puppet. The baleful blood puppet's body could be considered very tough. When it was hit by Xiao Qianfeng's heaven-burying secret sword, it was only slightly damaged. Now, under the attack of the 3 earth-shattering barbaric beasts, it was actually broken and twisted. It was basically useless. However, it was worth it to be able to obtain such an opportunity for Chu-Mu. He quickly took action and took out the cores of the 3 earth-shattering barbaric beasts. Then, he put the spatial bracelets of the 5 members of the Berserker squad, as well as their swords and other valuable items into his spatial ring. Using the Profound of Fire, he condensed a few wisps of flames and landed them on the corpses. The flames burned fiercely and soon burned the corpses to ashes. Henceforth, the Berserker squad was annihilated. No one saw this scene, so no one knew that the Berserker squad had been annihilated. Moreover, it was under the sword of a beginner sword hunter. Letting out a sigh of relief, Chu-Mu used his movement skill again. This time, he didn't use any Intent Realm or Profound of Fire. He simply used the Flying Swan illusory steps and flew towards the holy city of the Wildlands. Whether it was Intent Realm, Profound of Fire, or Sword Intent, they all required the use of one's mental strength. The consumption might not be great, but that was under normal circumstances. Now, the aftereffects of the heaven-burying secret sword had overdrawn Chu-Mu's mental strength. It was already good enough that he could barely stay awake. How could he dare to continue using his mental strength? While heading towards the holy city of the Wildlands, Chu-Mu recovered his mental strength. After a few hours, the holy city of the Wildlands was in sight. Chu-Mu's mental exhaustion had also disappeared a little. He didn't feel as uncomfortable as before. Taking out the beginner sword hunter token, Chu-Mu entered the holy city of the Wildland. He immediately returned to the house he had bought and sat cross-legged on the futon. He closed his eyes and got rid of all distracting thoughts. He meditated to speed up the recovery of his mental strength. After half a day, his mental strength had completely recovered. The mental exhaustion had also been completely eliminated. However, Chu-Mu wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he laid on the bed and planned to rest for a while. In the past 4 months in the ancient wildlands, he had almost never rested. His mental strength and body were always under tension. Proper rest would be better for him. This time, Chu-Mu slept for a full 14 to 14 hours. When he woke up, it was already the afternoon of the next day. He felt refreshed. He moved his body a little, and the bones all over his body made crisp, cracking sound. He drew his sword and practiced a few rounds of basic sword arts to fully move his body. Let's see what I got from killing the Berserker squad first. Then I'll go to the Sword Hunter Mansion. I wonder how many hunting points I can get this time? Chu-Mu thought to himself. After checking, he couldn't see the Sword Hunter tokens of the 5 members of the Berserker squad. This was because they weren't Chu-Mu's tokens. Therefore, he couldn't use them to transfer the hunting points to himself. As for the other things, there were quite a lot. For example, the inner cores of the wildlands giant beasts and valuable materials. In addition to the ones that Chu-Mu had hunted himself, there were quite a lot of them. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 580. As he arrived at the sword hunter mansion, Chu Mu heard several primary sword hunters discussing the 5 talents of the holy city. After passing the primary sword hunter assessment, Yang Lianfeng had never left the holy city of the ancient wilderness. He spent most of his time cultivating in the 10,000 killing array and meditating on sword intent and profound in the Enlightenment Pagoda. Whether it was the 10,000 killing array or the Enlightenment Pagoda, both required hunting points and spirit stones. Yang Lianfeng had only obtained the primary sword hunting token, and there were only 100 hunting points. He could only cultivate for 2 hours, so how could he cultivate in the 10,000 killing array or the Enlightenment Pagoda for a long time? The reason was simple: he had the support of a backer. As a talent valued by the Jade Sword Gang, the Jade Sword Gang would naturally provide him with a variety of resources. Hunting points and spirit stones were part of this. Of course, 1 hour was 100 hunting points and 10,000 high-grade spirit stones. A day had 24 hours, and a month had 360 hours. If he stayed in the 10,000 killing array or the Enlightenment Pagoda for an entire month, then he would need to consume 36,000 hunting points and 36 million high-grade spirit stones. After several months, that would be several 100,000 hunting points and over 100 million high-grade spirit stones. It had to be said that in order to train Yang Lianfeng, the Jade Sword Gang had spent a great deal of resources. Of course, besides Yang Lianfeng, the Barbarian Sword Association's Jiu Barbarian, the Ancient Desolate Building's Yi Wushuang, and the Sky Sword Association's Su Xiaoxiao were also in the city. Most of their time was spent in the 10,000 killing array or the Enlightenment Pagoda. As for Feng 7, who hadn't joined any forces, there was no news about him. It seemed that after obtaining the primary sword hunting token, he had left the holy city of the ancient wilderness and had gone deep into the ancient wilderness. He hadn't returned yet, and no one knew where he was. Besides talking about the 5 talents, there was also talk about the upcoming battle between Chu Mu and Yang Lianfeng. There was still more than a month to go. Like before, everyone was optimistic about Yang Lianfeng, but not Chu Mu. This opinion was becoming more and more obvious. It was very simple. Many people knew about Chu Mu. They knew that he had entered the ancient wilderness to hunt down wild beasts to earn hunting points, and they also knew that he had used these hunting points to enter the Enlightenment Pagoda. In the eyes of others, Chu Mu's speed of improvement couldn't compare to Yang Lianfeng's. Therefore, there was no doubt that Chu Mu would lose. "Hey look, isn't that Chu Mu? Looks like he just came back from the ancient wild realm and is here to exchange his hunting points." What a pity! Chu Mu didn't pay any attention to these discussions. Instead, he walked to the window for regular missions and asked, "I have a large amount of wild beasts materials and cores. Is there a bigger place?" "Please follow me," the person in charge of the routine mission said. In the swordsman mansion, there was a special room for the swordsman hunters to store large amounts of savage beasts' body materials and inner cores. "How did you get in? Could it be that he gained a lot this time?" "That's impossible. He's just a beginner sword hunter. How much can he gain?" After Chu Mu entered the room, he saw that it was empty and spacious enough. He took out the body materials and dawn of the savage behemoths and began to exchange them for hunting points. The swordsman in charge of the exchange was dumbfounded as he watched Chu Mu continuously take out materials from the savage behemoth's body and inner cores. Because there were too many. The statistics began. About 15 minutes later, the statistics were finished. A total of 26,000 hunting points, the swordsman in charge of the exchange said to Chu Mu. "What do you think of this value?" Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. He thought of the strange savage behemoth that he killed in the cave where he obtained the Millennium Milk. He didn't recognize it, so he took out the body of that savage behemoth. This savage behemoth wasn't very big. Its total length from head to tail was only 10 meters. Its appearance was also quite strange. It looked a bit like a crocodile and a python. It was a combination of the two, but it also had some characteristics of a savage-clawed dragon. Its fine scales were very compact, dark red in color, and covered with strange patterns. Its body was almost perfectly streamlined, and there was a single horn on its forehead. Its forelimbs were relatively short, and its claws were very sharp. Its hind limbs were relatively thick and long. It seemed like it could crawl on the ground and move forward like a crocodile. It could also run with its hind limbs like a savage, swift dragon. Its most distinctive feature was its tail. Its body was 10 meters long, and its tail was 5 meters long. The thickest part was about as thick as an adult's thigh. The tip of the tail was extremely sharp, like a diamond star. It was so sharp that people didn't dare to look at it directly. Chu-Mu knew very well how powerful this unknown savage behemoth's tail was. To be able to kill this strange savage behemoth, Chu-Mu had a lot of luck. This savage behemoth had just laid its eggs, so its body was weak and hadn't recovered yet. Its strength was only 10% of its usual. Chu-Mu, on the other hand, had reached perfection in the sword touch and had used bipolar strength twice to kill it. This is... The member of the Sword Hunter Mansion frowned. As a member of the Sword Hunter Mansion, his knowledge of savage behemoths was definitely above Chu-Mu's. However, he didn't know what kind of savage behemoth this was. Wait a moment, I'll go get the elder. After a while, Elder Dong, who was dressed in white, was invited over. So it's you. Elder Dong saw Chu-Mu, and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. Chu-Mu was one of the few people who had passed the primary sword hunter exam that he had presided over. Elder Dong naturally had an impression of him. Greetings, Elder. Chu-Mu saluted with his sword. Are these the savage behemoths you've killed? Elder Dong glanced at them and asked in a surprised manner. Some of them are and some of them aren't. Chu-Mu replied. Elder Dong didn't ask any further. His gaze fell on that strange savage behemoth. It seemed that he was attracted to it, and couldn't move his eyes away. Strange, how could this be? Elder Dong appeared beside that strange savage behemoth like a ghost. He reached out his hand and touched the fine scales. He carefully examined them. The more he examined them, the more shocked his face became. After a long time, Elder Dong stood up. He shook his head and nodded, and muttered to himself. Chu-Mu couldn't understand what he was saying. You're Chu-Mu, right? Did you kill this savage behemoth? Elder Dong suddenly looked at Chu-Mu and asked. In an instant, Chu-Mu felt a vast aura rushing towards him. Under this aura, nothing could hide. A thought came into his mind, and Chu-Mu almost impulsively told the truth. Fortunately, Chu-Mu's willpower was strong, and he woke up in time. When I found this savage behemoth, it was already dead. However, it seemed to have died not long ago, and its inner core was also gone. Chu-Mu said. The inner core was actually in his space ring. Because this savage behemoth should have been a mountain breaker level savage behemoth, its inner core was better than that of an earth breaker level savage behemoth. Naturally, Chu-Mu kept it for himself. In fact, he also kept all the mountain breaker level savage behemoth's inner cores that he found in Sha Kuang's supreme grade space bracer. Elder Dong kept staring at Chu-Mu. His eyes were extremely sharp, like the reflection of a sword. He wanted to see through Chu-Mu. He couldn't be sure whether Chu-Mu was lying, but he was quite clear about his own ability. He felt that a junior sword hunter like Chu-Mu couldn't lie under his aura. Therefore, even if Chu-Mu's words weren't completely true, they should still be close to the truth. I have never seen this savage behemoth before. It has a bloodline that has mutated many times, and is very rare. How about this? The Sword Hunter Mansion will take this savage behemoth. I will give you 100,000 hunting points as a reward. Elder Dong hesitated for a moment, and then said, 100,000. The nearby Sword Hunter Mansion personnel were shocked. 100,000. Chu-Mu's face was also full of shock. He couldn't believe this. 100,000 is indeed a lot, but an unknown savage behemoth is even more precious. Elder Dong simply explained. Good. Chu didn't speak any nonsense. 100,000 hunting points, if he didn't take it then he would be a fool. These 100,000 hunting points were enough for him to stay in the Enlightenment Pagoda or the 10,000 killing array for a very long time. It could definitely allow his strength to rise to the next level. I heard that in a month, you will fight Yang Lianfeng. Elder Dong suddenly said. He looked deeply at Chu Mu and said, I think that you will exceed everyone's expectations. You will know when the time comes, Chu Mu said with a smile. Elder Dong took away the strange savage behemoth. As for Chu Mu's primary sword hunting token, he gained 126,000 hunting points. If converted to the time he spent in the 10,000 killing array or the Enlightenment Pagoda, that would be 1,260 hours, a full 3 months. With this huge harvest of hunting points, Chu Mu was greatly relieved. At least for some time, he wouldn't have to rush around for hunting points. I'll use up all these hunting points. Once I use them up, I'll leave the ancient wild realm and go to the Myriad Origin Palace. With this thought, Chu Mu left the Sword Hunter Mansion and went directly to the Enlightenment Pagoda. He planned to meditate in the Enlightenment Pagoda until he reached a bottleneck, and then go to the 10,000 killing array to cultivate. Just as he was about to enter the Enlightenment Pagoda, Chu Mu saw Yang Lianfeng come out of the Enlightenment Pagoda. Yang Lianfeng's aura was much fiercer than it had been a few months ago. It was very threatening. Yang Lianfeng also saw Chu Mu, and the corners of his mouth curled up in a sneer. As Yang Lianfeng passed by Chu Mu, his cold and disdainful words reached into Chu Mu's ears. I advise you to use your limited time to enjoy yourself. Otherwise, no matter how hard you work, it will only be a futile struggle. After a month, you will die under my sword. After several months of meditating in the Enlightenment Pagoda and cultivating in the 10,000 killing array, Yang Lianfeng knew that his own strength had greatly increased. Therefore, he was full of confidence, and did not place Chu Mu in his eyes. Don't think too highly of yourself, Chu Mu lightly replied. Not to mention, I have never regarded you as an opponent. Anyone can talk big. When the time comes, you will know what regret is. Yang Lianfeng coldly said. Chu Mu ignored him, and strode into the Enlightenment Pagoda. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 581. 56% Sword Intent. 57% Sword Intent. 58% Sword Intent. 56% Sword Intent. Finally, after a month of meditation in the Enlightenment Pagoda, Chu Mu's sword intent reached 60% as he wished. On one hand, it was the potential he had accumulated through the 4 months of constantly fighting the savage beasts in the ancient savage realm. On the other hand, it was Chu Mu's monstrous comprehension ability. Adding on the amplification from the Tao Comprehending Pagoda, his comprehension speed had increased by 100 times. This continued for a month without stopping. The increase in his sword intent was like riding a rocket. But 60% was already Chu Mu's current limit. He knew that even if he used all his remaining hunting points to comprehend the sword intent, it would be difficult for him to break through 60%. However, Chu Mu's 60% sword intent was different from other swordsmen's 60% sword intent. After the impact of the still water sword intent, it was comparable to an ordinary 60% sword intent. And because of the embryonic form of the sword soul, it was enough to fight against an ordinary 70% sword intent. 70% sword intent, that was the first requirement for Sword Intent Deshang to obtain the title of Sword Venerable. There were still more than 10 days before the battle with Yang Lianfeng. Chu Mu planned to continue staying in the Enlightenment Pagoda. This time, he would comprehend the Wukong conception and the 3 profound meanings. 10 days was a little short. Therefore, Chu Mu planned to comprehend the 3 profound meanings first. After reaching the limit, he would comprehend the concept of emptiness. With the help of the aftermath of comprehending the sword intent, Chu Mu's comprehension ability was at a high level. It was easy for him to comprehend the profound meanings. Soon, the tearing profound meaning reached 45%. Chu Mu then switched to comprehending the two profound meanings of water and fire. The dual polarity sword technique was based on the fusion of the two profound meanings of water and fire. Therefore, the two profound meanings had to be the same in order to fully unleash its power. Otherwise, it would be weakened. Comprehending two kinds of power Upanishads at the same time was really difficult. However, Chu Mu's comprehension ability was really amazing. He had comprehended the two kinds of power Upanishads to 45%, which was equal to the ripping power Upanishad. Of course, the combined power of the water and fire profound was much stronger than the ripping profound. With 3 days left, Chu Mu began to comprehend the concept of emptiness. At this time, Chu Mu felt like he was going straight ahead. It was as if all obstacles had been broken through, unable to obstruct him in the slightest. He easily entered a state of comprehension. All sorts of mysteries of the concept of void appeared in his mind and were perceived by him. His concept of emptiness began to rise as if there was no bottleneck. Where there were people, there was competition. This was a world of interests and pursuits. In the eyes of most people, the battle between Chu Mu and Yang Lianfeng was not worth watching. Chu Mu was definitely not Yang Lianfeng's match. Half a year ago, this was the case. Half a year later, the gap was even greater. This was what almost everyone knew. However, there were still people who started gambling. There were several types of bet. The first type was that Chu Mu would be defeated by Yang Lianfeng in one move. The odds were 1/5. The second type was that Chu Mu would survive 3 moves from Yang Lianfeng. The odds were 1/1. The third type was that Chu Mu would survive 10 moves from Yang Lianfeng. The odds were 1/2. The fourth type was that Chu Mu would survive 20 moves from Yang Lianfeng. The odds were 1/3. There were only these 4 types of bet. No one thought that Chu Mu could survive 20 moves from Yang Lianfeng. On the third day, Chu Mu left the Enlightenment Pagoda. His concept of emptiness had already reached 90%. He had encountered a bottleneck and could not continue to improve. Even if he spent all his time comprehending today, it would be difficult for him to improve his concept of emptiness. Forget it. I'll deal with Yang Lianfeng first, then continue to comprehend. Muttering to himself, Chu Mu looked at the sky and prepared to return to his residence. However, along the way, he kept hearing all sorts of discussions about his battle with Yang Lianfeng. Naturally, he also heard about the bet this time. Bet? Chu Mu pondered for a moment, then a smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Interesting. It seems that I'm destined to make a huge profit this time. After staying in the Enlightenment Pagoda for more than a month, not only did he spend more than 50,000 hunting points, but he also spent more than 50 million high-grade spirit stones. Chu Mu's spatial ring suddenly became much emptier. The spirit stones he had left were not enough to support him to use up the remaining hunting point. Therefore, Chu Mu also needed to find a way to earn a large amount of spirit stones. The bet this time just happened to give him this opportunity. Chu Mu stopped a swordsman and asked where to place his bets. Then, he turned around and went to the giant beast bank in the holy city. The colossal beast bank was the banker who opened the bet this time. When Chu Mu arrived at the giant beast bank, a large number of swordsmen had gathered here. It was very lively, like a market. All kinds of discussions came one after another, and the content of the discussions were all related to the bet. I bet on the first one. Chu Mu will be defeated by Yang Lianfeng in one move. I bet 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. Although Yang Lianfeng is stronger than Chu Mu, I don't think Chu Mu can't even withstand one move. I bought the second one, also 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. This time I can earn 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. I also bought the second one. I think Chu Mu should be able to withstand a few more moves. To be safe, I bought the third one. Anyway, if I lose, I'll lose 5,000 top-grade spirit stones. If I win, I can get 10,000 top-grade spirit stones. I bought the third and fourth one for 30,000 top-grade spirit stones. Chu Mu couldn't help but be speechless. He knew that he was underestimated, but he didn't expect it to be so obvious and thorough. Friend, which one do you want to buy? I advise you to buy the second one. Chu Mu should be able to withstand 3 moves from Yang Lianfeng. Chu Mu was lining up when a swordsman behind him suddenly said to him, "Is this Chu Mu that weak?" Chu Mu asked with a smile. "I haven't seen this Chu Mu before, so I don't know how strong he is. However, I also heard that this Chu Mu doesn't have a backer. After obtaining the elementary sword hunter, he always goes out to hunt to earn points before entering the Enlightenment Tower. In half a year, his strength shouldn't have increased significantly. As for Yang Lianfeng, he is really powerful. In addition to the full support of the Jade Sword Gang, it is rumored that he has comprehended 60% of his sword intent." The swordsman behind Chu Mu excitedly said. "So that's how it is." Chu Mu nodded. This was also good. At the very least, if everyone looked down on him, he would be able to gain more. The line moved forward. Finally, it was Chu Mu's turn. "Which one do you want to buy?" Someone from the giant beast bank asked. "I bet on Chu Mu to win." Chu Mu smiled. "Bet on Chu Mu to win? Which one?" The person nodded and repeated. Suddenly, his expression changed. He looked at Chu Mu and asked, "What did you say?" "I bet on Chu Mu to win." Chu Mu repeated in an indifferent tone. "Bet on Chu Mu to win? Are you crazy?" The person from the giant beast bank screamed. The other swordsmen also reacted. They were all shocked and looked at Chu Mu as if he was crazy. They thought that Chu Mu had lost his mind. "What? You opened a gambling house, but you only dare to let people bet on Yang Lianfeng and not Chu Mu?" Chu Mu wasn't angry. Instead, he faintly smiled. The person couldn't do anything because the bank didn't open such a gambling house. "Since we opened a gambling house, of course, we accept any kind of bet." A voice sounded. A tall and thin old man walked out of the bank. He had his hands behind his back, as if he was taking a stroll. He had a strange smile on his face. He looked at Chu Mu and said, "How do you plan to bet on Chu Mu to win? How about this? Since you want to bet on Chu Mu to win, it means that you have great confidence in Chu Mu. Then let's play big. Bet that Chu Mu will defeat Yang Lianfeng in 1 move. The odds are 100 times. If you don't dare, then don't come here to make trouble." Chu Mu felt that the other party's expression was a bit strange, especially the other party's eyes. Maybe the other party knew him. In that case, it wasn't so simple. "Okay, I will bet 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones that Chu Mu will defeat Yang Lianfeng in 1 move." Chu Mu said without hesitation. 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones. Suddenly, the surrounding swordsmen screamed and sucked in cold air. They were shocked. 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones, that was a lot. If Chu Mu really defeats Yang Lianfeng in 1 move, then he can get 100,000,000 top-grade spirit stones. A swordsman murmured in a daze. 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones was indeed shocking, but it was still within the acceptable range. After all, there were many people in the sacred city who could take out 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones. However, 100,000,000 top-grade spirit stones was either a big force or a swordsman at the level of the sword of Gojoseon. How is it possible? How can Chu Mu defeat Yang Lianfeng, let alone in 1 move? In the face of the crowd's discussion, Chu Mu didn't say anything. Instead, he took out boxes of top-grade spirit stones. 1 box was 10,000 pieces, a total of 100 boxes. It could be said that these top-grade spirit stones were most of Chu Mu's remaining spirit stones. If he lost, Chu Mu's spirit stone reserve would drop to the lowest point. If he won, 100 million top-grade spirit stones were enough to make his wealth comparable to some powerhouses at the level of the sword of Gojoseon. Heaven and hell were separated by a single thought. In the midst of the shock, the people of the giant beast bank issued a gambling receipt to Chu Mu. If Chu Mu really defeats Yang Lianfeng in one move, then you can use this receipt to receive 100 million top-grade spirit stones from our bank. Remember, our bank only recognizes the receipt, not the person. As he spoke, the tall and skinny old man of the bank revealed a trace of mockery. However, I think that even if you throw away this receipt, it doesn't matter because Chu Mu will only lose under Yang Lianfeng's sword. Let's wait and see. Chu Mu took the receipt and put it into his interspatial ring. The tall and thin old man stared at Chu Mu's hand. His body trembled and his pupils shrank. He turned around thoughtfully and a gloomy smile hung on the corner of his mouth. He was a deacon of the giant beast bank and also had some relatives with Yang Lianfeng. It was precisely because of this that he supported Yang Lianfeng and targeted Chu Mu. However, he saw something unusual from Chu Mu's fingers. In order to confirm whether it was true or not, he had to go back and check the relevant information. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 582. The next day, the sun slowly rose from the east, emitting a golden-red light that scattered across the ancient wilderness. The sacred city of the wilderness was abnormally lively. Chu Mu and Yang Lianfeng. An ordinary-looking young man walked into the city gate and muttered to himself with a faint smile. He was Feng Qi, who had disappeared for half a year. When he returned, his aura had more than doubled compared to half a year ago. In the world of swordsmen, all kinds of battles were inevitable. Therefore, the sacred city of the wilderness had specially built a sword arena for swordsmen to fight. The sword arena of the sacred city of the wilderness occupied a large area, like a huge arena. The ladder-shaped stairs around it could accommodate hundreds of thousands of people without any pressure. At this moment, the stairs were filled with people. Everyone was talking about the fight between Yang Lianfeng and Chu Mu, as well as the bet. The hundreds of thousands of swordsmen present had all placed bets, ranging from a few thousand high-grade spirit stones to hundreds of thousands of supreme-grade spirit stones. In total, there were more than 100 million supreme-grade spirit stones. However, those true powerhouses did not appear because in their eyes, whether it was Yang Lianfeng or Chu Mu, they were only of the younger generation. It was like an adult and a child. No matter how much trouble the child caused, as long as it did not involve the adults, they would basically ignore it. Moreover, a sword battle was a common thing in the world of swordsmen. As for the 5 talents, Feng Qi had returned and was naturally present. The 9 barbarians of the Barbarian Sword Association, Yi Wushuang of the Ancient Desolate Building, and Su Xiaoxiao of the Heavenly Sword Association were all present. Beside Su Xiaoxiao sat a swordsman who looked somewhat similar to her, but was older. He looked to be in his 30s. At this moment, a commotion came from the crowd. A large group of people walked in from the entrance of the arena. They were lined up neatly, and the uniforms on their bodies indicated their identity: Jade Sword Gang. The person walking at the front was one of the 2 main characters of this sword battle, Yang Lianfeng. The members of the Jade Sword Gang standing behind Yang Lianfeng were the sword guards of the Jade Sword Gang. Although they looked like they were protecting Yang Lianfeng, they were actually there to increase Yang Lianfeng's power and prestige, making Yang Lianfeng's appearance look extraordinary. Yang Lianfeng himself had his hands behind his back, his head held high and his chest puffed out. He had a valiant and high-spirited appearance, walking with a majestic gait. It was as if at this moment, he was the main character. Everyone's eyes were focused on him, as if they were welcoming the arrival of a king. Yang Lianfeng is here. His aura is so sharp. What a grand display! Looks like the Jade Sword Gang is using Yang Lianfeng's battle as an opportunity for him to rise. Chu Mu is so sad. He actually became a stepping stone for Yang Lianfeng to step into the circle of experts in the sacred city. Humph, how shameless! Su Xiaoxiao frowned and said disdainfully. Although he's a little pretentious, he does have some ability. If you were to fight against him, you might not necessarily be his opponent. Su Haoxiao lightly smiled and said. Su Xiaoxiao snorted with an unconvinced expression, but she didn't refute because the one who spoke was Su Haoxiao. Su Haoxiao was the swordsman who left a purple 93 scale attack on the sword steel outside the Sword Hunter Mansion. In the past few years, no one had been able to surpass his result. He was also an expert among the senior swordsmen. To be able to receive such a comment from him, it was enough to show that Yang Lianfeng's strength was indeed extraordinary. Yang Lianfeng, who was full of extravagance, walked step by step to the center of the sword battle arena. When he stood in the middle of the arena, a sharp light shot out from his eyes, leaving traces in the air. At this moment, Yang Lianfeng was the focus. Facing the gaze of tens of thousands of swordsmen, his heart couldn't help but surge with pride. A kind of ambition was rapidly expanding, and he couldn't help but let out a long roar. His roar was majestic and surging towards the sky, as if it was a sword that could break the sky. Yang Lianfeng opened his hands as if he wanted to take the entire sky into his chest. At this moment, he was indeed extraordinary. At the same time, Chu Mu also appeared at the entrance. Only he was walking towards the sword battle arena by himself. In terms of appearance, Chu Mu was thrown far behind by Yang Lianfeng. In terms of aura, Chu Mu was also completely defeated by Yang Lianfeng. This is simply weak, too weak. If it was me, I definitely wouldn't come. I would secretly leave the holy city and never step into the ancient savage desolate realm again. Although the ancient savage desolate realm was a very good training ground, the central sword domain was so big that swordsmen didn't necessarily have to stay in the ancient savage desolate realm. Yang Lianfeng also saw Chu Mu and immediately looked over. His sharp aura seemed to have found an opening. It turned into an invisible sword and shot towards Chu Mu, as if it wanted to pierce through Chu Mu. Swish, 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 swish. The sound of air being sliced continuously rang out. Yang Lianfeng's aura was extremely sharp. What a powerful aura! If it was me, my legs would go soft in the face of this aura. Facing Yang Lianfeng's sudden burst of aura, although it was targeted at Chu Mu, the other swordsmen still felt it and their expressions changed greatly. After half a year of bitter training, Yang Lianfeng is indeed stronger than before. Chu Mu, who bore the brunt of Yang Lianfeng's aura, didn't sway in the slightest in the face of it. He still took a step forward and walked towards the sword battle arena at a steady pace. He wasn't affected at all. Su Haoxiao's eyes suddenly lit up and revealed an interested expression. Yang Lianfeng's expression turned cold as he withdrew his aura. He stretched out his hand and pointed at Chu Mu. A thunderous roar came from his mouth. Chu Mu, come up and die. 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 Yang Lianfeng's roar reverberated in the huge sword battle arena and reverberated in the ears of every swordsman. In that instant, the combination of killing intent and aura shook the heavens and the earth. Gaining the upper hand with a show of strength, Yang Lianfeng does have some tricks up his sleeve. Su Haoxiao nodded his head slightly. Before the battle even started, his aura and voice were already suppressing his opponent, bringing an invisible pressure to his opponent and causing his opponent to lose their balance. This caused him to be unable to use his full strength when the battle finally started. This was a battle tactic. It had to be said that although Yang Lianfeng loved to be in the limelight and was a little pretentious, his strength was real. Furthermore, his wisdom was above ordinary people. He had the capital to be arrogant. Chu Mu stepped onto the sword battle arena and faced Yang Lianfeng. I thought you would escape the ancient savage desolate region overnight. I didn't expect you to have such guts to come. Yang Lianfeng's figure did not move as he stood in the center of the sword battle arena with his hands behind his back. It was as if he was the center of everyone. He coldly smiled at Chu Mu and said, "This is also good. I'll leave your corpse intact." As he spoke, a powerful and sharp aura burst out, showing Chu Mu his position. He did not give an inch and occupied the center, suppressing Chu Mu with his aura. Chu Mu casually responded to this. "It's him." Suddenly, someone exclaimed and pointed at Chu Mu. "What's him and not him? Did you guys know that someone bet on Chu Mu defeating Yang Lianfeng in one move? I was guessing that person's identity, but I didn't expect it to be Chu Mu himself." "What? He bet on himself defeating Yang Lianfeng in one move? Crazy, he's really crazy." Suddenly, it was as if a pot had exploded as the discussions became even more intense. "He's too arrogant, too arrogant." Many swordsmen shook their heads. "I heard that he even bet 1,000,000 supreme-grade spirit stones for himself. Isn't that sending spirit stones to the giant beast bank?" "That's right. No matter how many spirit stones he has, he can't be so stupid." "So the person who bet was himself. I don't know if he's confident or arrogant." People like the 9th Barbarian, Yi Wushuang, Feng Qi, and the others muttered. "Brother, this Chu Mu is really arrogant," Su Xiaoxiao said. "He bet 1,000,000 supreme-grade spirit stones on himself to defeat Yang Lianfeng in one move." Su Haoxiao muttered softly and looked at Chu Mu with even more curiosity. "Oh, so the idiot who bet on defeating me in one move is you." Yang Lianfeng immediately looked at Chu Mu as if he was looking at an idiot. His eyes were filled with pity. "You talk too much nonsense," Chu Mu said indifferently. He did not take everyone's discussion to heart and directly ignored them. The facts would prove who was the real idiot. "Chu Mu, do you dare to sign a life-and-death contract with me and fight to the death?" Yang Lianfeng's expression turned cold as he asked. "Why wouldn't I dare?" Chu Mu said indifferently. "Very well, sign your name." Yang Lianfeng waved his hand and 3 pieces of paper spun at high speed and flew toward Chu Mu. Chu Mu pinched his fingers and unfolded them to take a look. The content was nothing more than a life-and-death battle between Chu Mu and Yang Lianfeng. There was no winner, only life and death. The one who was killed would have no choice but to take revenge on the other in any way. After that, they had to sign their names. Yang Lianfeng had already signed his name. Obviously, he was prepared. Chu Mu also signed his name. In addition to the names of both parties, they also needed a notary. A notary was not something that anyone could take up. Once someone broke the contract, a notary would have to step forward to uphold the contract. This notary had to be someone with great influence. "Why don't we invite brother Su Haoxiao to be the notary?" Yang Lianfeng glanced at Su Haoxiao and said in a clear voice, "I'll be the notary." Su Haoxiao looked at Yang Lianfeng and then looked at Chu Mu. He seemed to be thinking. After 3 breaths, Su Haoxiao stood up and took a step forward. His whole body was like a soaring eagle as he landed on the stage. "All right, I'll be the notary." As he spoke, he signed his name in the notary column of the life and death contract. After that, there were 3 life and death contracts. Yang Lianfeng kept 1, Chu Mu kept 1, and Su Haoxiao, the notary, kept 1. I won't say anything unnecessary. From the start of this battle, no matter who lives or dies in the end, they have to follow the contents of the life and death contract. Otherwise, I, Su Haoxiao, will pursue this matter to the end. Su Haoxiao said indifferently. It was not a threatening tone, but it was more effective than a threat. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.